Serena, 32 years old, and 5 hours ago I stood in the lobby of the most expensive ski resort in Aspen, watching my marriage dissolve over a hotel reservation. My husband stood 5 feet away, studying the chandelier, while the receptionist told me I had nowhere to sleep. Behind me, my sister-in-law Jessica laughed a sound that cut through the lobby chatter like a knife. She adjusted her fur coat and announced to the room that this was a trip for real family only. I looked at the platinum credit card in my hand, the one that paid for this entire trip, and realized that being a good wife had only made me a target. I took a deep breath, looked my mother-in-law in the eye, and prepared to show them exactly who they were messing with. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind someone of your worth. The automatic doors of the Aspen Peak Resort slid open, unleashing a gust of sub-zero wind that bit through my wool coat, but the chill inside the lobby was far worse. The air smelled of pine and expensive perfume, the kind that costs more than a mortgage payment. My husband Dante walked ahead of me, pushing a cart stacked high with Louis Vuitton luggage belonging to his mother Lucille and his sister Jessica. I trailed behind, dragging my own suitcase, the wheels struggling against the plush Persian rugs. We approached the check-in desk, a slab of imported Italian marble that gleamed under the warm amber lights. Jessica stepped forward first, slamming her hand on the counter with the entitlement of a woman who has never worked a day in her life. "Reservation for the King family," she announced, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. "2 executive suites and 1 deluxe room for my mother." The receptionist, a young woman with a tight bun and a tired smile, typed rapidly on her keyboard. "Ah, yes. Welcome back, Ms. King. We have the suites prepared. Champagne is waiting on ice." I stepped forward, my voice calm despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "And 1 room for Serena Vance, please." The typing stopped. The receptionist frowned, her eyes scanning the screen. "I am sorry, ma'am. I do not see a reservation under that name." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Dante. He was suddenly very interested in the architecture of the lobby ceiling, refusing to meet my gaze. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "My husband booked the rooms." Dante. Dante finally looked down, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Well, actually, Serena, there was a mix-up with the booking site. It was fully booked." Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, stop lying to her, Dante. It is pathetic." She turned to me, a smirk playing on her lips that she did not bother to hide. "There was no mix-up, Serena. I canceled your room." "Excuse me," I asked, the words coming out as a whisper. "This is a nuclear family trip," Jessica said, enunciating each word as if speaking to a child. "That means blood relatives. The Kings. You know how Mom gets about energy. We just wanted a weekend without outsiders. Besides, you are a freelancer. We did not think you could afford the resort fees on your own, and Dante has already spent enough on charity this year." I looked at Lucille. My mother-in-law was busy inspecting her manicure, looking bored. She did not even blink. "Dante," I said, my voice hardening, "you are okay with this? You are okay with your wife being homeless in Aspen in the middle of a blizzard?" Dante sighed, reaching into his wallet. He pulled out a supplementary credit card, one with a $500 limit that he had given me for groceries. "Babe, do not make a scene. It is just for 2 nights. Look, take this card. There is a motel about 10 miles down the mountain. It is clean. Just grab an Uber and I will call you when we are done with family time." The audacity hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The lobby was silent. Even the receptionist looked away, embarrassed for me. I looked at the card in his hand, the card that was attached to the bank account I had quietly filled with my own money for years to support his struggling medical practice. I reached out and took the card. Dante smiled, relieved, thinking I was going to comply like I always did. Thinking I was still the desperate girl who was lucky to marry into a family of doctors and socialites. I held the card up between my thumb and forefinger. Then with a flick of my wrist I snapped it in half. The crack was loud, echoing off the marble floors. Serena Dante hissed, his face flushing red. "What is wrong with you?" "Keep your motel money, Dante," I said, my voice steady, loud enough for the guests nearby to hear. "And enjoy your family time. I hope it is worth it." I turned around and walked toward the exit, dragging my suitcase. I did not look back even when I heard Jessica say, "Finally, the trash took itself out." I stepped out into the biting cold. The snow was falling heavily now, blurring the lights of the resort. I pulled my coat tighter, shivering as the wind whipped against my face. I walked until I was out of sight of the main entrance, around the corner to the service side of the building where the delivery trucks idled. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dante. "Stop being dramatic. Go to the motel." I deleted the message. Then I opened my contacts and dialed a number I had not used in 6 months. It rang once. "Ms. Vance." A deep voice answered immediately. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" "Hello, Marcus?" I said, watching my breath form clouds in the freezing air. "I am currently standing outside the north service entrance of the Aspen Peak. I need access to the owner's penthouse. Now." There was a pause, followed by the sound of typing. "Ms. Vance, we were not informed of your arrival. The penthouse has been winterized, but I can have the heating on in 5 minutes. I am coming down personally to escort you. Please, do not move." 3 minutes later, a side door clicked open. Marcus, the general manager of the resort, stepped out. He was a tall man in an impeccable suit, and unlike the receptionist, he knew exactly who I was. He did not see Serena the freelancer. He saw Serena Vance, the silent majority shareholder of the investment group that had bought this resort 3 years ago. "I am terribly sorry, Ms. Vance," Marcus said, rushing to take my suitcase. "Why did you not check in at the VIP desk?" "Because, Marcus," I said, stepping into the warmth of the service corridor, "sometimes you need to see how people treat you when they think you are nobody." He led me to a private elevator hidden behind a decorative tapestry. He scanned his fingerprint and the doors slid open. We bypassed the guest floors entirely, shooting straight up to the 20th floor. The penthouse was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the snowy mountains. A fire was already crackling in the stone hearth. It was 4 times the size of the suite Jessica was currently bragging about. I walked over to the desk and opened my laptop. Marcus stood by the door, awaiting instructions. "Marcus," I said, my eyes fixed on the screen. "Connect my laptop to the resort's internal security feed. I want to see inside the King family's suite, and pull up the billing information for their rooms." "Consider it done, Ms. Vance." Within moments, the screen flickered to life. I saw them. Jessica was jumping on the bed like a child, popping a bottle of champagne. Dante was sitting on the sofa, looking miserable, staring at his phone. Lucille was holding up a dress, critiquing the fabric. I opened a new window on my laptop. It was a folder labeled Jessica Financials. I had been compiling it for months, ever since I noticed discrepancies in our joint accounts. Jessica acted like she was old money, but her fashion business was bleeding cash, and I had a suspicion she was using Dante to plug the holes. I leaned back in the Italian leather chair, watching them celebrate my departure. They thought they had won. They thought they had exiled me to a cheap motel. They had no idea I was right above their heads, holding the deed to the roof they were sleeping under. An hour later, my phone pinged. It was Dante again. "Mom says you can come to dinner. But do not make it weird. We are at Le Sommet. Wear something nice." I stared at the message. The audacity was almost impressive. They kicked me out, and now they wanted me back just to have a punching bag at the table. Or maybe they realized they needed someone to pay for the wine. I went to the walk-in closet, where I kept a permanent wardrobe for my site visits. I bypassed the evening gowns. Tonight was not about looking like them. It was about knowing my place, or rather the place they assigned to me. I put on a simple black turtleneck and slacks, looking clean but unassuming. I took the private elevator down and walked into Le Sommet, the resort's Michelin-starred restaurant. The maitre d' stopped me, looking me up and down, but before he could speak, I caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. He paused, recognizing me from the board meetings, and bowed his head slightly, stepping aside. I saw them immediately. They had the center table right under the grand chandelier. Jessica was wearing a white sequined dress that caught the light, laughing loudly at something her mother said. Dante was nursing a whiskey. I walked up to the table. Silence fell immediately. "Oh, you actually came," Jessica said, not bothering to look up from her menu. "I thought you would be sulking in your motel room by now." I sat down in the only empty chair. It was not at the main table. It was a smaller fold-out chair, pulled up to the corner, squeezed between the main table and the service station, where the waiters stacked dirty dishes. Next to me sat the nanny for Jessica's children, a kind woman named Maria, who looked uncomfortable. "I see you saved me the VIP seat," I said dryly, unfolding my napkin. Lucille sipped her water. "Do not start, Serena. The table only seats 4 comfortably. Besides, you and Maria have so much in common. You can talk about whatever it is you people talk about." I looked at Maria. She lowered her eyes. I looked at Dante. He was cutting his steak aggressively, refusing to look at me. "So Dante," I said, my voice carrying over the music, "how is the suite?" "It is fine," he muttered. "Fine," Jessica interjected. "It is magnificent, although the service is a bit slow. I had to ring 3 times for ice. Honestly, Serena, you should apply for a job here. You are used to serving people, right? With your little consulting gigs." Before I could answer, a man in a sharp gray suit approached our table. It was Mr. Sterling, a potential investor. Jessica had been desperate to meet for her failing fashion line. Jessica's eyes lit up. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Mr. Sterling," she exclaimed, putting on her best socialite smile. "I am so glad you could make it over. Please join us." Mr. Sterling looked at the table, his eyes glazing over Jessica and Dante, and landing squarely on me. He paused, a look of confusion crossing his face. He opened his mouth to speak, likely to greet me by name, but Jessica cut him off. "Oh, do not mind her," Jessica said, waving a hand in my direction. "That is just Serena. She is helping us out on this trip, sort of a part-time assistant for the family. You know how hard it is to find good help these days." I felt the air leave my lungs. Part-time assistant. Help. Mr. Sterling looked at me, his eyebrows raising slightly. I held his gaze, keeping my face completely neutral. I gave him a microscopic shake of my head. "Do not blow my cover. Not yet." He cleared his throat, looking back at Jessica with a new coldness in his eyes. "I see. Well, I just stopped by to say hello. I have a business meeting to attend to." As he walked away, Jessica sat down, huffing. Why was he so weird? "Do you think he liked my dress?" "You look desperate, Jessica," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" Her head snapped toward me. I reached for the salt shaker in the center of the table. As I did, Jessica's hand shot out. She backhanded my arm hard. My hand jerked, hitting her wine glass. The glass tipped over. Dark red Cabernet Sauvignon splashed across the front of her white sequined dress. The restaurant went silent. Jessica screamed. She stood up, staring at the growing red stain on her chest. "You idiot!" she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You clumsy, jealous cow! You did that on purpose?" I sat there calm amidst the chaos. "I did not do it." "You hit my arm! Liar!" Lucille shouted, standing up to defend her daughter. "I saw you. You are jealous because she belongs here and you do not." Dante finally looked at me. His eyes were dark with anger. "Serena, seriously. Look what you did. That dress cost $2,000. "It was an accident," I said, though I felt no remorse. Lucille grabbed a cloth napkin and threw it at my face. It hit my cheek and fell into my lap. "Fix this. Go to the bathroom with her and scrub it out. Now. Do not come back to the table until it is spotless." I looked at the napkin in my lap. Then I looked at Dante. He nodded toward the bathroom. "Go, Serena. Just help her. Stop making things difficult." Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap like the credit card. It was a quiet final click. The last thread of my marriage, the last ounce of my patience severed. I picked up the napkin and dropped it on the floor. "No," I said. "What did you say to me?" Lucille asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I stood up. I said, "No, I am not your maid. I am not your assistant. And I am certainly not scrubbing cheap wine out of a dress she cannot afford." I turned to the waiter who was hovering nearby, looking terrified. "Bring me the wine list," I said. The waiter scrambled to hand it to me. I flipped to the back page, the reserve list. "I will take the 1995 Chateau Margaux," I said. It was a $5,000 bottle. "And put it on room 402, I added, pointing at Jessica. "Since I am the help, I assume my employers are covering my expenses." I walked away from the table, leaving them stunned, the sound of Jessica's sobbing following me all the way to the bar. I sat down on a velvet stool, smooth and cool against my legs. The bartender, who had watched the entire scene, placed the bottle in front of me with a look of pure respect. I poured myself a glass, the deep red liquid swirling as I swirled my own plans for the next 48 hours. They thought this was just a family spat. They thought I was just acting out. They had no idea that upstairs on my laptop, the file labeled Jessica Financials was just the beginning. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like oak berries and absolute cold-blooded justice. Tomorrow they were going to drag me shopping to max out my credit cards. They were going to try to humiliate me on the ski slopes. But tonight I was going to enjoy my wine. Because by the time this weekend was over, the only thing the King family would own in this resort was the bill. The morning sun hit the snow-capped peaks of Aspen with a blinding brilliance that usually signaled the start of a perfect day. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of the owner's penthouse, the world looked serene, untouched, and expensive. I took a sip of my espresso, enjoying the silence that money could buy. But the vibration of my phone on the marble countertop shattered the peace. It was a text from Dante. "Jessica feels bad about last night. Meet us in the lobby in 20 minutes. We want to take you shopping. Peace offering." I stared at the screen. A peace offering. In the language of the King family, a peace offering usually meant a trap or a demand disguised as a gift. I could have stayed in the penthouse. I could have ignored them and spent the day enjoying the spa treatments that Marcus had already comped for me. But revenge is a dish best served with evidence. And I had a feeling that today, Jessica was going to hand me the smoking gun I needed on a silver platter. I dressed down. Faded jeans, a thick beige sweater, and boots that had seen better days. I wanted to look exactly like the poor, struggling freelancer they believed I was. I grabbed my wallet, checking to make sure my specific credit card, the one with the limitless black magnetic strip hidden under a custom sticker that made it look like a standard debit card from a credit union, was in the front slot. When I stepped off the elevator in the main lobby, avoiding the VIP lift, this time they were waiting. Jessica looked remarkably fresh for someone who had spilled wine on herself 12 hours ago. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a fur coat that I knew was rented. Dante stood next to her, looking anxious, checking his watch. "There she is," Jessica chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. She linked her arm through mine as if she had not called me a cow the night before. "Look, Serena, I overreacted at dinner. The altitude, it makes me emotional. I want to make it up to you. Let us go spend some money." Dante gave me a pleading look. "Just go with it," his eyes said. We walked out into the crisp air, heading toward the promenade of luxury boutiques that lined the base of the resort. Jessica did not take me to the souvenir shop or the local bakery. She marched straight toward the golden H of the Hermes boutique. I assumed we were window shopping. I assumed wrong. Jessica swept into the store like she owned the building. The sales associate, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, looked up. I saw the flicker of recognition in Claire's eyes when she looked at me. She had been at the board meeting last year. But I gave her the slightest shake of my head. She paused, then composed herself, putting on her professional mask. "Welcome to Hermes," Claire said. How can I assist you today? I need a bag, Jessica announced. Something that says apology, but also says status. And maybe a scarf for my mother. For the next 45 minutes, I became the invisible audience to the Jessica show. She demanded to see the Birkins kept in the back. She critiqued the stitching on a Kelly bag that cost more than most people's cars. She treated Claire like a servant, snapping her fingers when she wanted a mirror. Dante stood by the door, scrolling on his phone, ignoring the mounting total in his head. Finally, Jessica made her selection. 3 bags, a classic black Birkin for herself, a smaller clutch for Lucille, and surprisingly, a canvas tote bag. This one is for you, Serena, Jessica said, tossing the canvas tote toward me. It landed on the counter. It is the cheapest thing here, but hey, it is still Hermes. You can use it for your groceries. I looked at the tote. It was $2,000. The other 2 bags brought the total to $40,000. Wrap them up, Jessica commanded, slapping her platinum credit card on the glass counter. Claire rang up the items. The tension in the room was palpable. I watched the card reader. Jessica tapped her foot impatiently. Beep! Claire looked at the screen, then at Jessica. I am sorry, ma'am. The card was declined. The silence that followed was louder than a scream. Jessica's sunglasses slid down her nose. Excuse me. Run it again. It is a platinum card. I can run it again, Claire said politely. But the terminal indicates a block from the issuer. Usually, that means the credit limit has been exceeded. Jessica's face turned a shade of red that matched the scarf she had rejected earlier. That is impossible, Dante. Call the bank. They are freezing it because we are traveling. Dante walked over, sweat beading on his forehead. He whispered something to Jessica. I heard the hiss of her whisper back. I do not care, fix it. I cannot leave these bags here. Do you know how embarrassing that is? Dante turned to me. He looked sick. He looked like a man who was trapped between a rock and a hard place, and he had decided I was the cushion he would land on to save himself. Serena, babe, he started, his voice cracking. Do you have your card on you? I blinked. My card. Dante. I have my savings account debit card, the one I use for emergencies. Yeah, that one, he said, forcing a smile. Look, Jess's bank is being weird. Security protocols. If we call them, it will take hours. Can you just front the cost? I will wire you the money as soon as we get back to the room. I promise. I looked at him. I looked at Jessica, who was refusing to make eye contact, pretending to inspect her fingernails. You want me to pay $40,000, I asked. That is my entire life savings, Dante. That is the down payment for my own apartment I have been saving for 5 years. Please, Jessica snapped, finally looking at me. Do not be dramatic. Dante is a doctor. We are good for it. Unless you want us to walk out of here empty-handed and explain to Mom why she did not get a gift. This was it, the trap. If I said no, I was the selfish wife who humiliated the family. If I said yes, they would bleed me dry and never pay me back. They were banking on my submission. They were banking on the fact that I loved Dante enough to set myself on fire to keep him warm. But the fire was already out. Okay, I said softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the beat-up card with the sticker of a cartoon cat on the corner. A sticker I had put there specifically to make it look childish and unprofessional. I handed it to Claire. Claire took the card. She knew. She knew that underneath that sticker was a centurion chip linked to a chaotic amount of capital. She looked at me for confirmation. Run it, please, I said. The machine beeped. Approved. Jessica let out a breath she had been holding. Finally. God, Serena, why do you have such a high limit on a debit card? Inheritance from my grandmother? I lied smoothly. It is all I have left of her. Well, you are spending it on family, Jessica said, grabbing the bags before the receipt even printed. That is what grandmothers would want. Claire handed the receipt to me. I took it. I folded it carefully. Actually, I said, could you print a duplicate gift receipt just for the warranty? Claire nodded and printed a second slip. I tucked both receipts into my wallet. As we walked out of the store, Jessica walking 10 feet ahead with her new Birkin, Dante fell into step beside me. "Thanks, babe," he muttered. "You really saved the day. I will write you a check." "When, Dante?" I asked. "Soon," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Once the practice picks up. Or once Jessica's company goes public. You know how it is. Cash flow." I knew exactly how it was. Jessica's company was not going public. It was going under. And Dante's practice was drowning in malpractice insurance premiums he had not told me about. They had just stolen $40,000 from me. But as I watched Jessica strut down the snowy street swinging the bag bought with my money, I did not feel robbed. I felt powerful. Because in the state of Colorado, theft by deception over $100,000 is a Class 3 felony. And combined with the hotel fraud, the unpaid loans I had found in their files last night, and this little shopping spree, they were inching closer to that number every hour. I touched the wallet in my pocket. The receipt felt heavy like a judge's gavel. "Nice bag," I called out to Jessica. She looked back and winked. "It is, isn't it?" "Try not to lose the canvas one, Serena. It is probably the most expensive thing you will ever own." I smiled. "Oh, Jessica, you have no idea what I own." We headed back to the hotel. The wind was picking up, signaling the storm that was forecast for tonight. Fitting, I thought, because the real storm was not coming from the sky. It was walking right behind them in a pair of old boots holding a receipt that was about to cost them everything. The Alpine Sanctuary Spa was located in the basement of the resort, a cavernous world of slate bamboo and eucalyptus steam that cost $500 just to enter. After the shopping spree where I had just unwillingly financed Jessica's wardrobe, she insisted we come here. She called it a thank you, but I knew better. Jessica did not do gratitude. She did maneuvering. She wanted me relaxed, pliable, and naked, stripped of my defenses, so she could push whatever agenda she had planned next. We changed into plush white robes that felt like clouds against the skin. I followed Jessica past the hydrotherapy pools and the meditation pods, watching how she walked. She strutted even in slippers, head high, ignoring the staff who bowed as she passed. I kept my head down, playing the role she had cast for me, the tired, grateful sister-in-law who was just happy to be allowed inside the gates. "Let us hit the cedar sauna first," Jessica said, pushing open a heavy glass door. "It is good for toxins. And God knows, Serena, you look like you are carrying a lot of stress. It is probably all that financial worry, right? Living paycheck to paycheck must be exhausting." I did not answer. I just adjusted my robe and followed her into the heat. The sauna was small, intimate, and oppressively hot. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and dry heat that instantly dried out my contact lenses. We were the only two people inside. Jessica claimed the upper bench, laying her towel down with precision. I took the lower bench, curling my legs under me, leaning my head back against the hot wood. I closed my eyes, letting my breathing slow down. To Jessica, I looked like I was drifting off, succumbing to the heat. In reality, I was more awake than I had been all day. My senses were dialed up to 11. So Jessica said, her voice echoing slightly in the small wooden box. "Do you think Dante looks thin?" "I think he looks thin. He works too hard to support everyone." I knew she was baiting me. She wanted me to apologize for existing, for being a burden on her brother. "He is doing fine, Jessica," I murmured, keeping my eyes closed, feigning drowsiness. "The hospital shifts are long." She hummed, sounding unconvinced. "Just make sure you are taking care of him. A man of his status needs a partner who elevates him, not one who drags him down with common problems." I let out a soft, rhythmic breath simulating the early stages of sleep. I let my hand drop limp over the side of the bench. Jessica watched me for a moment. I could feel her gaze burning hotter than the sauna stones. Then I heard the rustle of her robe. She was shifting, getting comfortable. She thought she had won. She thought I was out cold. A moment later, a sharp electronic trill cut through the silence. Jessica had brought her phone into the sauna despite the 3 signs outside explicitly forbidding it. She answered on the first ring. Allô, maman. I didn't move a muscle, but my heart hammered against my ribs. She was speaking French. Jessica and her mother Lucille often used French as a secret code when they wanted to gossip in front of the help or in front of me. They assumed that because I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, my education ended at public high school English. They didn't know about the scholarship to the Sorbonne. They didn't know I spent my junior year in Paris interning at a finance firm where the negotiations were faster and more brutal than anything happening in this resort. I understood every single word. Yes, I am in the sauna, Jessica said, her French fluent but accented heavy with American vowels. She is here. She is asleep. Passed out like a peasant after a long shift. I kept my mouth slightly open, letting out a soft snore. Did you get the bags? Lucille's voice was tinny on the other end, but audible in the quiet room. Of course, Jessica laughed. The idiot paid for everything. $40,000, maman. I told you she was desperate for our approval. She handed over her card like a good little dog. I clenched my toes to stop my hands from making a fist. Good, Lucille said. But the bags are not enough, Jessica. We need the liquidity for the company. The payroll is due on Monday. If the checks bounce, the employees will talk to the press. I know, Jessica snapped, lowering her voice slightly. That is why tonight is crucial. I need Dante to sign the papers for the house. The house, Lucille asked. Which house? Their house, Jessica said. The Colonial in Connecticut. I had my lawyer draft a power of attorney and a second mortgage application. I am going to tell Dante it is just some updated insurance paperwork for the trip. He never reads anything. He is too busy trying to be the big man. But what about her? Lucille asked. Her name is on the deed too, isn't it? Jessica laughed again, a cruel, sharp sound. Please, I already have that covered. Dante has power of attorney over her accounts. I convinced him to get her to sign it months ago when she was sick with the flu, remember? He thinks it is for medical emergencies. I'm going to use it to co-sign the loan. By the time she wakes up and checks her credit score, the money will be in my corporate account in the Cayman Islands. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just mean-spirited gossip. This was conspiracy to commit bank fraud. This was grand larceny. They were planning to leverage my home, the sanctuary I had paid for, to save her failing vanity project. And Dante, my husband. He was either a complete fool or a willing accomplice. I didn't know which was worse. But Jessica, Lucille said, sounding worried. What if she finds out? She is quiet, but she is not dead. Maman, relax. Jessica scoffed. She is a nobody. She is a black girl from the South Side who got lucky marrying a doctor. She doesn't understand finance. She probably thinks a mortgage is a type of French cheese. Once we get the money, we will file for bankruptcy protection for the company, shield the assets, and leave Dante and her with the debt. Dante will divorce her to save his credit, and we will be free. It is a perfect plan. I slowly moved my left arm. My Apple Watch was on my wrist, currently in theater mode, so the screen was dark. I knew the layout by heart. I tapped the screen once to wake it, then swiped right. I tapped the complication I had set for voice memos. The tiny red circle appeared on the dim face of the watch. Say that again about the bankruptcy, Jessica, Lucille said. I want to be sure. I told you, Jessica said, articulating clearly, unaware she was dictating her own indictment. We funnel the loan money into the shell company. Jess Kuchar declares, Chapter 11. The bank goes after the collateral, which is Serena's house. We keep the cash. Dante dumps the wife. We win. Simple. I watched the waveform on my watch face dance in time with her voice. It was capturing everything. The acoustics of the wood sauna made her voice crisp and clear. I let her talk for another 2 minutes. She detailed the name of the crooked lawyer who drafted the papers. She laughed about how Dante was so desperate to please Mommy that he would sell his soul. She called me names that would have made me cry 5 years ago, but today they just made me focus. Finally, she hung up. Okay, Maman, I have to go. I need to wake up Sleeping Beauty and pretend to be her best friend again. It is exhausting acting like I like her. She put the phone down on the bench. I waited 10 seconds. Then I stirred. I stretched my arms over my head, letting out a long, exaggerated yawn. I tapped my watch screen, stopping the recording and saving it to the cloud immediately. I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. God, it is hot in here. How long was I out? Jessica jumped slightly, then smoothed her expression into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, just a few minutes. You were snoring. It was cute. You must be so tired from whatever it is you do. Yeah, I said, sitting up. Freelancing is a grind. You have to constantly watch your back. You never know when a client is trying to screw you over. I looked her dead in the eye. Jessica blinked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. But then she dismissed it. She stood up, wrapping her towel tighter. Well, let us go cool off. The plunge pool is waiting. And then we need to get you ready for dinner. I have a stylist coming to the room. I want you to look presentable for Mr. Sterling tonight. I stood up, towering over her in the small space. Thank you, Jessica, I said, my voice smooth as silk. You really think of everything. I do, she said, pushing past me to get to the door. That is why I am the CEO. I followed her out of the sauna, the cold air of the spa hitting my flushed skin. I felt light. I felt electric. She thought she was the CEO. She thought she was the shark in the tank. She didn't realize she was just the chum. As we walked back to the locker room, I touched my watch again, checking the file. 4 minutes and 12 seconds of pure, unadulterated confession. Tonight at the dinner with Mr. Sterling, I wasn't just going to break a glass. I was going to break her entire world. I smiled at the spa attendant as she handed me a cucumber water. Enjoy your relaxation, miss, she asked. Oh, I am, I said, taking a sip. I have never felt more ready for anything in my life. Jessica was already at the mirror fixing her hair, oblivious to the fact that the countdown clock on her life had just started ticking. She was planning to mortgage my house. Fine. I was about to foreclose on her future. The suite smelled of truffle fries and betrayal. When I walked into room 402, the atmosphere was so thick with tension, I could practically taste the metallic tang of anxiety in the air. Jessica was sitting on the velvet sofa pretending to read a fashion magazine, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. Dante was standing by the minibar, pouring a drink with a hand that shook slightly. They had summoned me via text message again. Come up for a nightcap, the message had read. We need to sign some boring paperwork for the ski activities tomorrow. I knew exactly what this was. I had heard the plan in the sauna. I had heard Jessica coaching Dante on how to present the documents. I knew that they were about to try and strip me of everything I owned while smiling in my face. Hey babe, Dante said, turning around with a forced smile. He looked tired. The stress of being an accomplice to his sister's fraud was wearing on him. He handed me a glass of sparkling water. I noticed he didn't offer me the good scotch he was drinking. Hi, I said, keeping my voice soft and compliant. I took the water but didn't drink it. So what is this about paperwork? I thought we were just going skiing. We are, Jessica interjected, snapping her magazine shut. But the resort has new liability protocols. Since the accident last year, they make everyone sign waivers. Medical release forms, insurance verifications, blah blah blah. It is standard. We all signed ours already. She pointed to a stack of papers on the coffee table. Dante picked up the folder. His knuckles were white as he gripped it. Yeah, it is just standard stuff, Serena. You know how litigious people get these days. If you break a leg on the slopes, we need to make sure the insurance covers the airlift. Otherwise, we are looking at $50,000 out of pocket. He laughed, but it sounded like a dry cough. Here, just sign at the tabs I marked. It saves time so you do not have to read through pages of legal jargon. He opened the folder and placed it in front of me, handing me a heavy gold pen from the hotel desk. I looked down at the document. They had been clever. The top page was indeed a standard liability waiver for the Aspen Peak Resort. It had the logo and the bold text warning about the dangers of alpine sports. But the staple at the top left corner looked loose, and the pages underneath were slightly misaligned. I sat down on the edge of the sofa. I adjusted my glasses. "Okay," I said. "I definitely do not want to pay for a helicopter ride. Let me just take a look." Jessica sighed loudly. "Oh my God, Serena, just sign it. Why do you have to be so difficult? It is a waiver. You are not buying a house." I ignored her. I lifted the bottom edge of the first page, just a fraction of an inch. There it was. Hidden underneath the waiver was a second document. The font was different. The paper quality was slightly heavier. I caught a glimpse of the words, "General Durable Power of Attorney." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was not just a mortgage application. It was a full power of attorney. If I signed this, Dante would have the legal right to access my bank accounts, sell my property, trade stocks in my name, and incur debt on my behalf. He could drain my life savings, transfer the funds to Jessica, and leave me with nothing but the clothes on my back. And he was standing there, my husband of 5 years, looking at me with those puppy dog eyes, urging me to sign my own death warrant. "Babe," Dante pressed gentle urgency in his voice. "We have an early start tomorrow." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I looked for a trace of hesitation. I looked for a sign that he was going to stop this madness and tell me the truth. There was nothing. Just fear of his sister and a desperate need for money. "Okay," I said. "You are right. I trust you." I saw Jessica's shoulders relax. She took a sip of her wine, hiding a smirk behind the crystal glass. I reached for the gold pen Dante had offered, but as I grabbed it, I clumsily knocked it out of his hand. It clattered onto the floor and rolled under the heavy oak cabinet. "Oops," I said, putting a hand to my mouth. "I am so clumsy. Sorry." Dante groaned and got down on his knees to fish it out. "Do not worry about it," I said quickly, reaching into my purse. "I have a pen. I always carry one for my journaling." I pulled out a sleek silver pen from my bag. It looked like a standard luxury ballpoint pen. But it was not. It was a specialized tool I had picked up at a security convention in Tokyo 3 years ago. It was filled with thermal-sensitive ink designed for temporary markups on architectural blueprints. The ink was a vibrant, deep blue when applied. But after exposure to air for approximately 12 hours, the chemical bonds broke down and the pigment vanished completely, leaving the paper pristine and blank. I clicked the pen. I turned the pages, pretending to just be finding the signature lines. In reality, I was making sure I signed the power of attorney document specifically. I found the line. Grantor's signature. I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper. The blue ink flowed smoothly. Serena Vance. I signed with a flourish. I even dated it. I signed the waiver on top. Then I lifted the page and signed the hidden document underneath. "There," I said, capping the pen and putting it back in my purse. "All done." Dante let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. He snatched the folder away from me almost too quickly. "Great, thanks, babe. I will run this down to the front desk so they can file it." He closed the folder tight. He did not want me to look at it again. He wanted that paper out of my hands and into a safe where he could use it to destroy me. Jessica stood up, looking triumphant. "Well, that is settled then. We are going to have a great day tomorrow. You should get some sleep, Serena. You look exhausted." She was kicking me out. Now that they had what they wanted, I was useless to them again. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My heartbeat was slow and controlled. "You are right," I said. "I am tired. It is exhausting trying to keep up with you guys." I walked to the door. "Good night, Dante," I said. He looked up from the folder he was clutching to his chest. "Good night, babe. Love you." The lie hung in the air, gross and heavy. "Love you too," I said. I walked out of the suite and heard the lock click behind me. I walked down the hallway, my steps silent on the thick carpet. I imagined what would happen tomorrow. Dante would take that folder to the bank representative or fax it to Jessica's crooked lawyer first thing in the morning. They would start the transfer process. They would try to move the money. But by the time the clerk looked at the document tomorrow morning, the signature line would be empty. It would look like an unsigned form. They would be confused. They would think it was a printing error. They would look for the original. And when they opened the folder, the original would be blank too. They would have no legal standing, no power, no money. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. As the doors closed, I checked my watch. It was 10 p.m. By 10 a.m. tomorrow, that signature would be gone. And by 10 p.m. tomorrow, Jessica would be standing on a stage in front of Arthur Sterling, trying to explain why her financial backing had vanished into thin air, just like the ink on that page. I leaned my head against the cool metal of the elevator wall and smiled. They wanted to play games with invisible money and fake assets. Fine. I just gave them exactly what they asked for. Nothing. The elevator chimed at the penthouse floor. I walked into my sanctuary, pouring myself a glass of real vintage wine, not the cheap stuff Jessica had been drinking. I walked to the window, looking out at the blizzard raging outside. The snow was covering everything, erasing tracks, burying secrets. Tomorrow on the slopes, Jessica was going to try to hurt me physically. She was going to try to break my body because she thought she had already broken my bank account. She was in for a surprise. Because the only thing breaking tomorrow was her reality. The air at the summit of Aspen Peak was thin and sharp enough to cut glass. At 11,000 feet, the world was nothing but blinding white snow and a sky so blue it looked artificial. I stood near the edge of the lift line, adjusting the bindings on my rental skis. They were scratched plastic monstrosities that smelled like mildew and damp feet. A stark contrast to the custom carbon fiber equipment I usually used in St. Moritz. But today I was not Serena Vance, the billionaire investor. I was Serena, the poor freelancer, and poor freelancers rented the cheapest gear available. Jessica glided over to me. She looked like a page out of a Vogue winter editorial. She was wearing a neon pink Moncler ski suit with a fur-lined hood, and her skis were brand new Vocals that cost more than my first car. She stopped with a spray of snow that landed deliberately on my boots. "Ready for the real mountains, Serena?" she asked, her voice muffled slightly by her designer neck warmer. "Or do you want to stay on the bunny hill with the toddlers?" I looked down the mountain. We were standing at the top of a run called the Widowmaker. It was a double black diamond. The sign posted next to us had a skull and crossbones on it, warning skiers of sheer drops, icy patches, and unmarked obstacles. It was dangerous even for experts. For a novice, which is what Jessica thought I was, it was a death wish. "I do not know, Jessica," I said, feigning hesitation. "This looks really steep. Maybe I should take the green route down. I do not want to slow you guys down." Dante skied up beside us. He looked uncomfortable in his gear, struggling to keep his balance on the flat surface. He was a decent skier, but he was cautious. "Yeah, Jess, maybe Serena should take the gondola down," he said. "That run is icy today. I heard the patrol talking about it." "Oh, stop babying her, Dante," Jessica snapped. She lowered her goggles, revealing her eyes, which were hard and calculating. "She wants to be part of the family, right? The Kings do not take the easy way down. Unless, of course, she is too scared." "Are you scared, Serena?" She was baiting me. She wanted me on that slope for a reason. I looked at the way she was positioning herself. She was not looking at the view. She was looking at the edge of the trail where the safety netting ended and the trees began. She had a plan. "I am not scared," I said quietly. "I just do not want anyone to get hurt." Jessica laughed, a harsh sound that was swallowed by the wind. "Only hurt pride, Serena. Come on, follow me. I will teach you how to carve." She pushed off her poles and dropped over the ledge. I watched her go. Her form was aggressive but sloppy. She leaned too far back in her boots, relying on the technology of her skis rather than actual skill. She was fast, but she was not in control. I looked at Dante. "Be careful," he said. "Just pizza wedge the whole way down if you have to. Do not let her get to you." I nodded and pushed off. The moment my skis hit the slope, my muscle memory took over. It took every ounce of my willpower to ski badly. I forced my knees to knock together slightly. I let my arms flail a bit. I scraped my edges loudly against the ice, pretending to struggle for traction. Ahead of me, Jessica was waiting. She had stopped in the middle of the narrowest part of the trail. On one side was a wall of rock. On the other was a steep drop-off into a dense forest of pine trees. "Come on, slowpoke," she yelled, waiting for me to catch up. I skied toward her, controlling my speed, making it look like I was barely holding on. As I got closer, I saw her shift her weight. She was not preparing to turn. She was preparing to check me. It is a common dirty trick in hockey and apparently in the King family playbook. She waited until I was just passing her on the inside near the drop-off. Then she lunged. It happened in slow motion. Jessica suddenly cut her skis sharply to the left, directly into my path. She claimed later she hit a patch of ice, but I saw her eyes. She looked right at me. She wanted to clip my skis. At this speed, and on this incline, if our skis tangled, I would be thrown sideways. I would tumble off the groomed trail and into the trees. At best, I would break a few ribs. At worst, I would hit a trunk at 40 miles per hour. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted me in a hospital bed so I could not attend the dinner tonight. But Jessica made one critical miscalculation. She assumed I was an amateur who would panic. I did not panic. As her bright pink ski suit blurred toward me, I did not pull back. I engaged my core and slammed my weight onto my downhill edge. It was a move I had perfected during winters in the Swiss Alps with Olympic instructors. In a split second, I transitioned from a clumsy snowplow to a razor-sharp carve. I cut a line so tight and aggressive that I was almost horizontal to the snow. I dodged her by inches. The sound of her skis scraping against the ice where I had been a millisecond ago was loud and terrible. Because she had put all her weight into the shove, she expected resistance. She expected to hit my body. When she hit nothing but empty air, her momentum betrayed her. She overextended. Her left ski caught an edge. Jessica screamed. Her legs crossed over each other. She spun wildly out of control. Without my body to break her fall, she kept going. She tumbled past me, a mess of pink fabric and flying equipment. She slid across the ice faster and faster, heading straight for the snowbank that marked the edge of the trail. I stopped instantly, digging my edges in, and coming to a complete graceful halt, sending a spray of snow into the air. I looked back up the hill. Dante was just cresting the ridge. He was too far away to see the details. He just saw his sister fall. I looked down. Jessica had hit the snowbank hard. One of her skis had not released. Her leg was twisted at an awkward angle. I skied down to her, casually dropping the act of the novice for a moment because there was no one close enough to see. I stood over her. Jessica was gasping for air, clutching her shin. "You pushed me!" she shrieked. Her face was pale, her makeup smeared against the white snow. "You pushed me! I felt you!" I looked down at her calmly. My skis were parallel perfect. My breathing was even. "I did not touch you, Jessica," I said, my voice flat. "You tried to cut me off. You missed. You bitch!" She sobbed, tears freezing on her cheeks. "My leg. I think it is broken." Dante skied up, spraying snow all over us as he panic-stopped. He threw his poles down and dropped to his knees beside her. "Jess. Oh my God. What happened?" "She pushed me, Dante." Jessica screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She cut me off. She tried to kill me." Dante looked up at me. His eyes were wide with accusation. Serena. What the hell? I stared at him. I did not defend myself. I did not explain physics to him. I simply pointed at the snow. Look at the tracks, Dante. He looked down. The snow told the truth. My tracks were a clean, smooth arc that curved away from her. Her tracks were jagged, erratic lines that cut sharply across the trail directly into my path before spiraling out of control. Anyone with eyes could see she initiated the contact. She tried to hit me, Dante, I said. And she missed. Dante looked at the tracks. Then he looked at his sister who was wailing in the snow. He knew. I saw it in his face. He knew she was lying. But he was a coward. We need a medic, he said, ignoring the evidence. Call ski patrol. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the emergency number for the resort. Medical emergency on the Widowmaker, I said into the phone. Female skier down, lower leg injury, possible fracture. Send a sled. I hung up. Jessica was moaning, gripping Dante's arm. Do not let her near me. She is crazy. She is jealous of me. I stood there watching them. The wind whipped my hair around my face. I felt a strange sense of detachment. A year ago, I would have been on my knees in the snow begging for forgiveness for something I did not do. I would have been crying, apologizing, taking the blame just to keep the peace, but the peace was gone. I looked at Jessica's twisted leg. It was not a severe break. I had seen enough ski injuries to know. It was likely a hairline fracture or a bad sprain. Painful, yes. Inconvenient, absolutely. But she would survive. However, it gave her exactly what she wanted. It gave her victimhood. The ski patrol arrived in minutes. They were efficient and professional. They loaded Jessica onto the sled, wrapping her in thermal blankets. I am riding down with her, Dante said. You meet us at the medical center, Serena. He did not wait for an answer. He skied after the sled, leaving me alone on the mountain. I watched them disappear around the bend. I adjusted my goggles. The run was empty now. I had no one to perform for. I pushed off. I skied the rest of the run as myself. I let go of the fear. I let go of the act. I flew down the mountain, carving S-curves so deep and precise, they felt like surgery. I felt the burn in my thighs and the rush of adrenaline in my chest. I hit the jumps, I took the steep lines, I moved with the grace of someone who had conquered mountains far bigger than this one. When I reached the bottom, I skied into the base area with a spray of snow stopping exactly in front of the medical center. I took off my skis and leaned them against the rack. I walked inside. Jessica was already in a triage room. I could hear her voice through the thin walls. She is a maniac doctor. She has been threatening me all trip. You have to document this. It was assault. I sat down in the waiting room. I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to my helmet camera. I had forgotten to mention that part. The rental helmet I was wearing had a built-in GoPro mount, but I did not use a GoPro. I used a micro camera disguised as a vent clip. It was always recording. I rewound the footage. There it was in high definition. Jessica looking back at me. Jessica swerving. Jessica missing. Jessica falling. I did not need to show this to the doctor. I did not need to show this to Dante. I saved the clip to a folder named Evidence. Then I walked over to the vending machine and bought a bottle of water. Tonight, Jessica would be in a cast. She would play the wounded bird. She would try to use this injury to guilt Arthur Sterling into giving her money. She would say she was a survivor. Let her have her cast. Let her have her pain pills. Because when she walked onto that stage tomorrow night, hobbling on crutches for sympathy, she was going to need a lot more than a doctor to fix what was about to happen to her. I took a sip of water. It was crisp and cold. Round one went to the mountain. Round two belongs to me. The smell of the medical center was a sharp contrast to the lavender and cedar scent of the hotel lobby. Here it smelled of rubbing alcohol and sterile gauze, the scent of bad news. I sat on the edge of a plastic chair in the hallway, listening to the low murmur of voices coming from room 3. My hands were folded in my lap. I was perfectly still. Inside my chest, however, the final embers of my marriage were burning down to ash. The door to room 3 opened. A nurse stepped out looking frazzled. She glanced at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion before hurrying down the hall. Dante appeared in the doorway a moment later. He was still in his ski gear, his boots unbuckled and clanking against the linoleum floor. His face was flushed, his eyes wild. He did not look like the man I had married 5 years ago. He looked like a stranger. "Get in here," he said. His voice was a low growl. I stood up and walked past him into the room. Jessica was lying on the exam table, propped up by pillows. Her leg was wrapped in a temporary splint. Her makeup was ruined, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. Lucille was standing by her head, stroking her hair, whispering soothing words in French. When I entered, the air in the room seemed to vanish. "There she is," Jessica sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Get her away from me." I stayed near the door, keeping my distance. "How is the leg, Jessica?" I asked calmly. "Don't you dare ask me," that she shrieked. "You know exactly how it is. You did this." I looked at Dante. He was standing with his arms crossed, staring at the floor. "Dante," I said, "you saw the tracks. You know I didn't touch her." Dante looked up. His eyes were wet. "I don't know what I saw, Serena. I saw my sister flying through the air. I saw you standing there watching her fall like it was some kind of sport. You didn't even try to help her. She tried to cut me off," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rising panic in my throat. "She missed. Physics took over. That is not my fault." "Liar," Jessica screamed. She tried to sit up but winced, falling back onto the pillows. "You hate me. You have always hated me because I see through you. You are jealous of this family. You are jealous that we have a legacy and you have nothing. You wanted to hurt me so I would miss the meeting with Mr. Sterling. You wanted to sabotage us." Lucille turned slowly to face me. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any humanity. She walked toward me. I could hear the click of her heels on the tile. "You represent everything that is wrong with this world," Lucille said softly. "You are ungrateful. We took you in. We let you sit at our table. We let you marry my son. And this is how you repay us, by trying to cripple my daughter." "I am not the one who needs to be repaid, Lucille," I said. The sound of the slap was louder than I expected. It cracked through the small room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. The sting was immediate and hot, spreading across my left cheek like wildfire. I tasted copper in my mouth. My glasses had been knocked askew. I froze. I did not touch my face. I did not cry out. I slowly turned my head back to look at her. Lucille's hand was still raised, trembling slightly. She looked shocked by her own violence, but not sorry. "Never sorry." Dante gasped, but he did not move. He did not step between us. He did not grab his mother's hand. He stood there, useless and silent. "Get out!" Dante yelled. I looked at him. "Excuse me," I said. "Get out!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You are toxic, Serena. You destroy everything you touch. Look at this. Look at my family. You did this. You are cruel and you are selfish, and I cannot look at you right now. Just get out of my sight." Jessica was smirking behind her hands. Lucille was rubbing her palm, glaring at me with hatred. And my husband, the man I had vowed to love and cherish, was looking at me like I was a disease. I reached up and adjusted my glasses. I touched my cheek. It was throbbing. This was it. For 5 years I had made excuses for them. I had told myself they were just stressed. I had told myself they were just protective. I had told myself that if I just worked harder, gave more, paid more, they would finally love me. But you cannot buy love from people who are emotionally bankrupt. The slap had not just hurt my face. It had woken me up. It was the physical confirmation of what I had known since the lobby. I was not their family. I was their prey. But predators make a fatal mistake when they corner something they do not understand. They assume fear. They do not anticipate rage. I looked at Dante one last time. I memorized his face. I memorized the cowardice in his eyes. I wanted to remember exactly what he looked like in this moment, so that later, when he was begging me for forgiveness, I would feel nothing. I am leaving, Dante, I said. My voice was frighteningly calm. It sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone powerful. Good, he spat. Good. Go back to the room. Pack your things. I want you out of the hotel by tonight. I don't care where you go. Just go. I nodded. I turned around and opened the door. As I walked out, I heard Jessica giggle. Mom, did you see her face? She looked like a kicked puppy. I walked down the hallway past the nurse's station, past the waiting room. I did not go to the hotel room to pack. I did not go to the lobby to cry. I walked straight to the elevator that led to the penthouse. I touched my cheek again. The skin was hot. That slap was going to cost them more than they could ever imagine. Lucille thought she had put me in my place. She didn't realize she had just handed me the moral license to destroy them completely. There are no more rules, I whispered to the empty elevator. The numbers on the display ticked upward. 18, 19, 20. I stepped out into my penthouse. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. There was a red handprint blooming on my skin. I did not cover it with makeup. I pulled out my phone. I took a high-resolution photo of my face. Then I opened the file on my phone labeled "The End." I dragged the photo into the folder, right next to the video of Jessica falling on the ski slope and the audio recording from the sauna. I walked over to the safe in the wall. I punched in the code. I took out the deed to the Connecticut house. I took out the loan documents for Dante's medical practice. I took out the promissory notes for the bailouts I had secretly funded. I laid them all out on the dining table. Dante wanted me gone by tonight. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus, the general manager. Marcus, I said. Yes, Ms. Vance, prepare the eviction notices, I said. For the King family. For all of them, Marcus asked. No, I said. Not for tonight. Let them sleep one more night. Let them think they have won. But tomorrow night, right after the gala, I want their keycards deactivated. And Marcus, yes, ma'am. Make sure the local police are on standby near the ballroom. There is going to be a disturbance. I hung up. I went to the bathroom and soaked a cloth in cold water. I pressed it to my face. The pain was good. The pain was focusing. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who had walked into that medical center was a wife trying to save her marriage. The woman staring back at me was a CEO preparing for a hostile takeover, and I never lost a takeover. The suite was silent when I returned, but it was the silence of a courtroom before the verdict is read. My cheek was still throbbing from Lucille's slap, a hot reminder of where I stood in the hierarchy of the King family. I walked into the living area where they were all waiting. Jessica was on the sofa, her leg propped up on a pillow, clutching a glass of wine like it was a lifeline. Lucille stood by the window, staring out at the white void of the blizzard. Dante sat in the armchair, his head in his hands. When I entered, nobody looked at me. It was as if I was already a ghost. Sit down, Serena, Lucille said without turning around. Her voice was cold and sharp like an icicle snapping. I remained standing. I prefer to stand, Lucille. What is this about? Jessica slammed her wineglass down on the table. What is this about? She hissed. It is about you ruining everything. It is about you trying to break my leg. It is about you humiliating us in front of the staff. We have a meeting with Arthur Sterling tomorrow night, a meeting that will save this family, and we cannot risk having you around to sabotage it. I looked at Dante. He finally looked up and his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. Dante, I said softly. It is a blizzard outside. The roads are closed. The news said it is 20 below zero with wind chill. We know, Dante whispered. And you are okay with this? I asked. You are okay with kicking your wife out into a storm because your sister is paranoid. It is not paranoia if you are actually out to get me, Jessica snapped. You are unstable, Serena. Mom is right. You have always been jealous of us. We cannot have you at the hotel tomorrow. Mr. Sterling values family harmony. If he sees you skulking around looking miserable, it will reflect poorly on us." Lucille turned from the window. Her face was a mask of stone. "You need to leave, Serena. Tonight, now." "Where do you expect me to go?" I asked, my voice steady. "The motel down the mountain is full. The roads are dangerous." "That is not our problem," Lucille said. "You are a resourceful girl. You survived growing up in the city. Surely you can survive one night in the snow. Go sleep in the lobby of another hotel. Go sit in the bus station. I do not care. Just get out of this suite and do not come back until we are checking out on Sunday." I looked at them, really looked at them. They were not just mean. They were dangerous. They were willing to risk my safety to protect their lie. I looked at Dante one last time. "Dante," I said, "if I walk out that door, I am not coming back. Not to this room, not to our house, not to us." Dante flinched. He looked at his mother. He looked at his sister. He looked at the lifestyle he so desperately wanted to maintain. "Just go, Serena," he said, his voice barely audible. "Please, just go before you make it worse." I nodded. "Okay," I said. I did not scream. I did not fight. I did not beg. I walked into the bedroom. I pulled my suitcase out of the closet. I packed slowly and methodically. I took my clothes. I took my toiletries. I took the book I had been reading. I checked the drawers to make sure I left nothing behind. I wanted to erase myself from their space completely. As I zipped up the suitcase, the sound seemed loud in the quiet room. I walked back out into the living room. They were watching me, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the tears. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the room key. I placed it gently on the coffee table next to Jessica's wine glass. "Goodbye," I said. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and walked to the door. I heard Jessica let out a long exhale of relief. Finally, she muttered. I opened the heavy door and stepped into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that felt like a guillotine blade dropping. I stood there for a moment in the corridor. I could hear the wind howling outside, rattling the windows at the end of the hall. Any other woman would be terrified right now. Any other woman would be dialing friends, crying, wondering where to sleep, wondering how she ended up married to a monster. But I was not any other woman. I adjusted the grip on my suitcase. I did not turn left toward the elevators that led to the lobby and the freezing exit. I turned right. I walked down the long carpeted hallway, past the ice machine, past the housekeeping closets until I reached the dead end, where a large tapestry of a mountain landscape hung on the wall. I reached behind the tapestry and pressed a small biometric scanner hidden in the frame. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing the private elevator. I stepped inside. The interior was lined with gold leaf and smelled of fresh jasmine. I pressed the button marked Penthouse. The elevator rose smoothly, silently, carrying me away from the fourth floor, away from the toxicity, away from the life of Serena Vance, the struggling freelancer. As the numbers climbed, so did my spirit. Floor 10. I took off my glasses and put them in my pocket. Floor 15. I pulled the hair tie out of my hair, letting it fall loose around my shoulders. Floor 20. The doors opened. The penthouse was warm. The fireplace was roaring. The lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow. Standing in the center of the room were three people. There was Marcus, the general manager, holding a tablet. There was Elena, my personal stylist, who I had flown in from New York on the corporate jet an hour ago. And there was Liam, my head of legal, who was arranging documents on the dining table. They all stopped and looked at me. "Ms. Vance," Marcus said, stepping forward. "We saw the family stay in the suite. Are you all right?" I walked into the room, leaving my old life and my old suitcase at the door. "I am better than all right, Marcus," I said, walking straight to the bar and pouring myself a glass of water. "I am liberated." Elena stepped forward, eyeing my baggy sweater and leggings with professional disdain. "We have a lot of work to do, Serena," she said. You look like you have been dragged through a hedge backward. I smiled. That was the look I was going for, Elena. The pathetic wife. But that role has been retired. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the resort. Somewhere 4 floors below me, Dante and his family were celebrating. They were probably toasting to their victory, thinking they had successfully discarded the dead weight. They had no idea that the dead weight was actually the anchor that had been keeping them from drifting out to sea. And now that I was gone, they were going to drown. Liam cleared his throat. I have the eviction papers ready for Sunday morning, Ms. Vance, and the foreclosure notice for the Connecticut house, and the lawsuit for the stolen funds. Do you want to review them? Not yet, Liam, I said, turning away from the window. Tonight is about transformation. Tomorrow is about execution. I looked at Elena. I need a dress, I said. I brought 5 trunks. Elena said, her eyes lighting up. What is the vibe? I looked at her. My eyes were hard, my voice was steel. The vibe is funeral, I said. Elena paused, confused. Funeral? Yes, I said. I want something black, something sharp, something that says I am here to bury the past and look good doing it, and I want diamonds. Not the small ones, the vault collection. Elena grinned, a predatory smile. I think I have exactly what you need. I walked toward the master bathroom, which was bigger than the entire suite I had just left. I am going to take a shower, I said. I want to wash the smell of desperation off me. When I come out, I want Serena the freelancer to be gone. I stepped into the bathroom and turned on the steam shower. As the hot water hit my skin, I let myself feel the pain one last time. I let myself feel the sting of the slap, the ache of the betrayal. I let a single tear mix with the water and wash down the drain. Then I turned the water off. I stepped out and wrapped myself in a towel that cost $1,000. I looked in the mirror. The red handprint on my cheek was fading, but the fire behind my eyes was raging. They wanted me to leave. They wanted me to disappear into the storm. I was going to give them a storm, all right. But it was not going to be outside. It was going to be inside the grand ballroom tomorrow night. And I was going to be the lightning that struck them down. The steam from the shower had cleared, and with it the last remnants of Serena, the submissive wife. I stood in the center of the master dressing room, wrapped in a silk robe that felt like water against my skin. The room was silent, but it was the silence of a coiled spring. I walked out into the main living area of the penthouse. It had been transformed. What was once a luxury relaxation space was now a command center. The furniture had been rearranged. 3 large monitors were set up on the oak dining table, displaying live security feeds from the ballroom downstairs, the main lobby, and the corridor outside the suite I used to share with Dante. My team was already in motion. Liam, my chief legal counsel, did not look up when I entered. He was typing furiously on a tablet, his fingers moving at the speed of litigation. Marcus, the head of security, was speaking into a radio earpiece, his voice a low rumble. And Elena, my personal stylist, was standing amidst a sea of open steamer trunks, like a general surveying her munitions. They stopped when they saw me. They did not see a victim. They did not see a woman who had just been slapped by her mother-in-law. They saw the asset. They saw the boss. Status report, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Liam stood up, adjusting his glasses. The ink on the power of attorney document you signed last night has fully evaporated, Ms. Vance. We accessed the digital scan Dante sent to the bank this morning. It is blank. The bank has already flagged the application as incomplete and suspicious. And the loan for Jessica's company? I asked, walking over to the table. Denied, Liam said with a grim smile. Furthermore, we have successfully traced the shell companies Jessica set up in the Cayman Islands. We have proof that she has been funneling investor money into personal offshore accounts. I have drafted the affidavit for the SEC. It is ready for your signature. I nodded. Good. File it the moment I step onto that stage. I want her to hear her phone blowing up with notifications from federal agents while she is trying to beg for money. I turned to Marcus. "Security?" I asked. Marcus clasped his hands behind his back. "We have 6 plainclothes officers positioned in the ballroom. We have cut the Wi-Fi to the podium, so her presentation will glitch unless we authorize it. And I have instructed the valet to block their car. If they try to run, they will not get past the driveway." "Perfect," I said. I turned to Elena. "Make me look like I own the place, Elena. Because I do." Elena clapped her hands and her 2 assistants rushed forward. They did not ask me what I wanted. They knew. I sat in the high-backed leather chair and let them work. For the next hour, I was a canvas. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of preparation. The snip of scissors, the hiss of hairspray, the soft clinking of makeup brushes. Usually, I preferred a natural look. I liked to look approachable. But tonight, approachability was not the goal. Tonight, I needed to look untouchable. Elena pulled my hair back into a sleek, severe chignon. It pulled the skin of my face tight, sharpening my cheekbones, making my eyes look wider and more dangerous. The makeup was minimal but precise. No blush, no softening contours. Just sharp winged eyeliner that could cut glass and a deep blood-red lip stain. Elena stepped back and tilted her head. "You look terrifying," she whispered. "It is perfect." "Now the dress," I said, standing up. Elena walked over to the largest trunk. She unzipped it slowly. "You said you wanted black," she said, pulling out a garment bag. "But when I heard about the slap, I made an executive decision. Black is for mourning Serena. Black is for widows. You are not mourning anything tonight. You are celebrating a massacre." She unzipped the bag. The fabric spilled out like liquid fire. It was red. Not a bright, cheery cherry red. It was a deep oxblood crimson, the color of oxygenated blood. It was a custom Valentino haute couture gown that had been sitting in my vault in Milan for special occasions. It was structured with a sharp architectural neckline that plunged daringly low, framed by stiff peaks that rose above the shoulders like armor. The waist was cinched tight, and the skirt flowed out in a dramatic train that would command any room it entered. I ran my hand over the silk crepe. "It is bold," I said. "It is necessary," Elena countered. "In a room full of black tuxedos and safe beige cocktail dresses, this is a declaration of war. When you walk in, nobody will be able to look at anything else. Jessica will look like a child playing dress-up next to this." I stepped into the dress. The silk felt cool and heavy. It hugged my ribs like a second skin. Elena zipped it up the back, the sound loud in the quiet room. I walked to the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at me was not Serena Vance, the freelancer. She was not the girl who tried to make peace. She was a statue of vengeance carved from ruby and ice. The red dress made my skin glow. It made me look tall, imposing, and utterly regal. "One more thing," Elena said. She opened a velvet box on the table. Inside sat the Vance family diamond, a necklace I had not worn since my inauguration as CEO. It was a single 20-carat pear-shaped diamond, suspended on a delicate platinum chain. It was worth more than the entire resort. Elena fastened it around my neck. The cold stone settled in the hollow of my throat, a heavy reminder of who I really was. I took a deep breath. I looked at the monitor. On the screen, I could see the ballroom filling up. I saw Dante adjusting his tie, looking nervous. I saw Jessica hobbling on her crutches, playing the sympathy card with a group of investors. I saw Lucille holding court at a table, looking smug. They were laughing. They were confident. They thought I was currently shivering in a bus station or crying in a cheap motel room. I turned to my team. "It is time," I said. Liam handed me a slim leather folder. "The evidence," he said. I took it. It felt light in my hands, but I knew it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. Marcus opened the door to the penthouse. "We have cleared the service elevator, Ms. Vance," he said. "We will bring you in through the back of the kitchen. You will enter the ballroom, right as Jessica starts her speech." I walked toward the door, my red train gliding over the floor behind me with a soft hiss. I paused at the threshold. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the holidays I spent cooking for them while they criticized the food. I thought about the money I quietly transferred to cover their bills. I thought about the way Dante looked at the floor when his mother slapped me. I felt a phantom sting on my cheek. I reached up and touched the diamond at my throat instead. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. "Let us go," I said. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing me in. As we descended, I checked my reflection in the polished metal doors one last time. Jessica wanted a show. She wanted drama. She wanted the spotlight. I was about to give her the performance of a lifetime. The elevator hummed, taking me down into the belly of the beast. The queen was coming, and she was not bringing mercy. She was bringing receipts. The grand ballroom of the Aspen Peak Resort was a cavern of gold leaf and velvet designed to make millionaires feel inadequate. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a prism of light over 500 of the wealthiest people in the world. The air smelled of expensive perfumed truffle oil and the specific metallic tang of unbridled ambition. I watched it all from the darkness of the service corridor behind the kitchen. Through the small circular window in the swinging door, I could see the table where my husband and his family sat. They had the prime spot right in front of the stage. They looked triumphant. Dante was wearing a tuxedo that I had paid for. He was laughing at something his mother said, his head thrown back, his hand gripping a glass of champagne. He looked relaxed for the first time in months. The tension that usually lived in his shoulders was gone, replaced by the loose-limbed ease of a man who believes his problems have solved themselves. He thought I was gone. He thought I was shivering on a bus heading back to Chicago or crying in a motel room down the valley. He thought he was safe. Lucille sat next to him, looking like the Queen Mother. She was wearing a silver gown that sparkled under the lights, and she held her chin high, surveying the room with a smug satisfaction. She was likely already mentally spending the money she thought Jessica was about to secure. And then there was Jessica. The stage was bathed in a soft, flattering spotlight. Jessica stood at the podium, gripping the wood like a pulpit. She was playing the part of the wounded warrior perfectly. Her injured leg was propped up on a discreet stool, and her crutches were leaned artistically against the side of the lectern. She was wearing a white dress that was meant to symbolize purity and resilience, but to me it just looked like a surrender flag. I adjusted the earpiece in my right ear. "Status, Marcus," I whispered. "All clear, Ms. Vance." Marcus's voice came back crisp and steady. "The police are in position. The exits are secured. The Wi-Fi jammer is active. You are cleared for entry on your command." I took a deep breath. The silk of my red dress felt cool against my skin. The weight of the 20-carat diamond at my throat was a physical anchor reminding me of who I was. I was not just a woman scorned. I was an institution. And institutions do not get mad. They get even. I looked back through the window. Jessica was leaning into the microphone, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. When we started Jess Couture, she said, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for Mr. Sterling. She knew exactly where the cameras were. We wanted to build more than a brand. We wanted to build a legacy, because in this fast-paced world, family is the only thing that truly matters. I almost laughed out loud. The irony was so thick I could practically taste it. Here was a woman who had tried to mortgage her sister-in-law's home behind her back, who had tried to push me off a mountain preaching about family values. "We have faced challenges," Jessica continued, her voice catching in her throat. "Just yesterday, I suffered a terrible accident on the slopes. A moment of carelessness from a stranger nearly cost me my life. But I am standing here tonight because the King family does not quit. We do not break. We support each other. We lift each other up." The crowd applauded politely. I saw Dante clap the hardest, nodding vigorously. He was so proud of her lies. He was so complicit in her delusion. Mr. Sterling was sitting at a table near the front. He was not clapping. He was checking his watch. He looked bored. He looked like a man who was counting down the seconds until he could leave. Jessica saw his lack of enthusiasm and doubled down. "And that is why we are looking for partners who understand that vision," she said, looking directly at him. "Partners who value integrity. Partners who know that when you invest in us, you are investing in a bond that cannot be broken. We are asking for $10 million, not just to expand a business, but to expand a philosophy of loyalty." That was the cue. Loyalty. I turned to the two security guards standing behind me. They were large men in black suits who looked like they could walk through a brick wall without slowing down. "Open the doors," I said. The guards nodded. They reached for the handles of the massive double doors at the back of the ballroom. These were not the service doors I had been looking through. These were the ceremonial entrance doors, the ones reserved for heads of state and visiting royalty. 1, 2, 3. The doors swung open with a heavy boom that echoed through the hall. At the exact same moment, Marcus cut the house lights. The ballroom plunged into darkness. The applause died instantly. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass and it shattered loudly on the parquet floor. "What is going on?" Jessica's voice squawked over the microphone. "Is this a power outage? Dante, do something." For 10 seconds there was absolute blackness. The tension in the room spiked. People were whispering nervously, wondering if it was an attack or a technical failure. Then the music started. It was not the polite string quartet music that had been playing all evening. It was a deep, bass-heavy instrumental track that I had chosen personally. It was ominous. It was powerful. It sounded like the heartbeat of a predator stalking its prey. And then the spotlight hit me. A single beam of blinding white light cut through the darkness, illuminating the doorway where I stood. The effect was instantaneous. Gasps rippled through the room. I stood framed in the light, my red dress blazing like a signal fire against the shadows. The train of the gown pooled around my feet like liquid ruby. The peaks of the neckline framed my face, making me look severe and untouchable. The diamond at my throat caught the light and scattered it in 1,000 directions. I did not smile. I did not wave. I simply stood there, letting them look at me. I saw the recognition hit the crowd in waves. First it was the strangers, the investors and the socialites who whispered, asking who the woman in the red dress was. They admired the gown, they admired the jewelry, they sensed the power radiating off me. Then it hit the King family. From my vantage point, I could see the VIP table, clearly even in the dark, because the spotlight spilled enough ambient light to reveal their faces. Dante was the first to see me. He had been standing up, presumably to go find a manager about the lights. When he saw me, he froze. His mouth fell open. He blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. He grabbed the back of his chair to steady himself. He looked like he had seen a ghost. A very expensive, very angry ghost. Lucille dropped her clutch. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes bulged. She recognized the diamond. She knew jewelry. She knew that necklace was not costume. She knew that necklace cost more than her entire life's earnings. The realization that the daughter-in-law she had called a peasant was wearing a fortune around her neck was causing her brain to short-circuit. And Jessica. Jessica was trapped in the spotlight on stage, but her eyes were locked on me. She gripped the podium so hard her knuckles were white. Her face drained of all color, leaving her makeup standing out in stark relief. She looked terrified. She looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar only to realize the jar belonged to a dragon. I took my first step. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a sharp, rhythmic sound that cut through the music. Click, click, click. I began to walk down the center aisle. The crowd parted for me. People actually stepped back, their eyes wide, pulling their chairs in to make way. They sensed that getting in my way would be a fatal mistake. Mr. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He turned to face me, and for the first time all night he smiled. It was a small, respectful smile. He bowed his head slightly as I passed him. "Good evening, Miss Vance," he murmured loud enough for the people around him to hear. I nodded to him without breaking my stride. "Mr. Sterling." The whisper ran through the room like wildfire. "Miss Vance." Did he say Miss Vance? Wait, is that the Serena Vance? The investor, the owner of Onyx Horizon. I could hear the pieces clicking together in people's minds. The freelancer, the nobody, the woman in the red dress. I kept walking until I reached the base of the stage. I stood directly in front of the King family table. I stopped. I looked down at Dante. He was trembling. He looked at my dress. He looked at the diamond. And then he looked into my eyes. He was searching for Serena, his wife. He was searching for the woman who forgave him. He found nothing. "Serena," he whispered, his voice shaking. "What? What are you doing?" I did not answer him. I did not even acknowledge him. I looked up at the stage. Jessica was frozen behind the podium. She looked small. She looked cheap. Her white dress looked like a rag compared to the blood-red couture I was wearing. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Every step was a judgment. I reached the podium. Jessica shrank back, clutching her crutches as if they could protect her. I reached out and took the microphone from her hand. She did not fight me. She was too paralyzed by shock. I turned to face the room. The spotlight widened to include me. I stood next to Jessica, eclipsing her completely. I waited for the music to fade. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. 500 people held their breath, waiting to hear what the woman in the red dress had to say. I scanned the room, making eye contact with the bankers, the investors, the movers and shakers. Then I looked down at my in-laws. "Jessica just spoke to you about integrity," I said, my voice amplified and crystal clear, ringing through the hall. "She spoke to you about family. She spoke to you about loyalty." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I am here to offer a correction." I reached into the leather folder I was carrying. Because while loyalty is a nice concept, I continued. Locking eyes with Dante receipts are a legal reality. I pulled out the first document. "Tonight we are not going to talk about the future of Jess Kuchar. We are going to talk about its past. And specifically, where your money has actually been going." Jessica made a small choking sound. She reached out to grab my arm. "Don't," she whispered, desperate. "Please, Serena, don't." I turned to her. I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It is Ms. Vance to you, Jessica." And then I turned back to the crowd and signaled to the projection booth. "Slide one, please." The massive screen behind us flickered to life, and the dismantling of the King family began. The heavy double doors of the grand ballroom swung open with a deep, resonant groan that cut through the silence like a thunderclap. The darkness of the room was absolute save for the single blinding column of white light that pinned me against the threshold. I stood there for a heartbeat, letting the moment stretch, letting the anticipation in the room curdle into anxiety. I stepped forward. The red Valentino silk flowed around my legs like liquid fire. It was not just a dress. It was an indictment. The crimson fabric caught the light and seemed to burn against the shadows, a violent contrast to the sea of polite black tuxedos and beige cocktail dresses. The train glided over the marble floor with a soft hiss, a sound that whispered of danger and royalty. I walked down the center aisle. My heels struck the stone with a rhythmic, deliberate cadence. Click, click, click. I kept my chin high. The 20-carat diamond at my throat felt heavy and cold against my skin, a physical reminder of the weight I was about to drop on the King family. I did not look left or right. I stared straight ahead at the stage where Jessica stood frozen behind the podium, like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. The crowd parted for me. I could feel their eyes on me. I could hear the sudden intake of breath from 500 people. They did not know who I was yet. To them, I was a mystery. I was an intruder. I was a vision. Who is she? Look at that dress. Is that the Vance diamond? The whispers rippled outward like waves from a stone dropped in a pond. I saw men in Italian suits straighten their ties as I passed. I saw women clutch their pearls in a mixture of envy and awe. For years I had walked through rooms like this as a ghost. I had been the invisible wife, the wallflower, the help. I had faded into the background wearing sensible colors and apologizing for taking up space. Tonight, I was the only thing in the universe. I approached the VIP table. The ambient light from the spotlight spilled over the faces of my in-laws. I saw them in high definition. Dante was the first to react. He had been slouching in his chair holding a glass of champagne with a loose grip. As I drew closer, he squinted. He leaned forward. Confusion clouded his handsome face. He saw a woman who looked vaguely familiar, but the context was so wrong, his brain refused to make the connection. He saw the posture. He saw the confidence. He saw the way I commanded the light. He did not see his wife. He saw a stranger who looked like the woman he had married in a fever dream. His mouth fell open. The glass of champagne tilted dangerously in his hand. Lucille sat next to him. She was paralyzed. Her eyes were not on my face. They were locked on my neck. She was a woman who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. She recognized the cut of the diamond. She recognized the clarity. She knew that the stone resting in the hollow of my throat was worth more than the entire frantic, desperate existence she had built. And then there was Jessica. From the stage, she looked down at me. She was bathed in the harsh glare of the stage lights, sweating in her white dress. She looked small. She looked cheap. As I walked into the pool of light directly in front of the stage, the realization finally hit them. It started with Dante. I saw the moment the penny dropped. I saw his eyes widen until the whites showed all around the iris. I saw the color drain from his face, leaving him looking sick and gray. He stood up. His legs hit the table, shaking the silverware. Serena. He whispered the name like it was a curse. Jessica heard him. She leaned over the podium, peering down into the blinding light. She saw the scar on my chin from a childhood bike accident. She saw the eyes that had watched her silently for 5 years. Serena, she breathed into the microphone. Her voice was amplified, booming through the silent ballroom. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. The mysterious, glamorous intruder was the sister-in-law. The one Jessica had just spent 10 minutes painting as a clumsy charity case. Jessica's face twisted. The shock was replaced instantly by a surge of ugly, defensive rage. She felt her moment being stolen. She felt the attention shifting away from her victimhood and onto my victory. She did not understand the dress. She did not understand the jewelry. She only understood that I was disobeying her. "What are you doing here?" Jessica shrieked. Her voice cracked, losing all its carefully practiced poise. "Who let you in? You were supposed to be gone." I did not answer. I took another step toward the stage. Dante scrambled around the table. He reached out as if to grab my arm, but then stopped, his hand hovering in the air, afraid to touch the silk. "Serena," he stammered. "Baby." "What? Where did you get that dress? Take it off. You look ridiculous. Everyone is staring." I turned my head slowly to look at him. I did not blink. "Let them stare, Dante," I said. My voice was low, but it carried with a terrifying clarity. "They have been staring at your lies all night. Now they can stare at the truth." Jessica slammed her hand on the podium. "Security!" she screamed into the microphone. The feedback whined, a piercing screech that made people cover their ears. "Get her out of here!" Jessica yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is trespassing. She is mentally unstable. She is dangerous. Where are the guards? I want her arrested." The crowd murmured nervously. People began to look around for the security team. "This is a private event!" Jessica shouted, her panic rising with every second I stood there. "She is not on the guest list. She is a fraud. Someone get this crazy woman out of my face." From the shadows near the emergency exit movement caught everyone's eye. Marcus, the head of security and general manager of the resort, stepped into the light. He was flanked by four large men in dark suits. Jessica let out a sigh of relief. She smirked triumphantly. Finally, she said, "Marcus, do your job. Throw this trash out into the street where she belongs." Marcus walked toward us. His stride was purposeful. His face was unreadable. He walked past Dante, who was cowering by the table. He walked past the confused investors. He walked straight to me. Jessica was still pointing, still smiling that ugly, twisted smile of a bully who thinks the teacher has arrived to back her up. "Grab her," Marcus Jessica commanded. "Don't be gentle." Marcus stopped 3 feet in front of me. He ignored Jessica completely. He did not even look at the stage. He turned his body, slightly blocking Dante from getting any closer to me. Then slowly, and with immense respect, Marcus bowed. It was not a nod. It was a formal, deep bow, the kind reserved for royalty or heads of state. The room went dead silent. Jessica's mouth dropped open. Her arm fell to her side. Marcus straightened up. He looked me in the eye. "Welcome home, Madam Chairman." Marcus said, his voice booming in the quiet room. He gestured to the ballroom with a sweep of his hand. "We have secured the perimeter as you requested. The resort is yours to command." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Madam Chairman." "Chairman." Dante made a sound like a dying animal. He looked from Marcus to me and back again. His brain was trying to process the impossible. The wife he bullied over grocery bills, the woman he forced to sign a power of attorney for a few $1,000s. She was the chairman. Jessica gripped the podium so hard I thought the wood might splinter. "What did you call her?" she whispered. Marcus turned slowly to look up at the stage. His expression was one of cold professional disdain. "I called her by her title, Ms. King. This is Serena Vance, the founder and majority shareholder of the Onyx Horizon Group, which means she owns this hotel, she owns the land you are standing on, and effectively, she owns the debt you are trying to run away from." The gasp from the crowd was audible. It started as a murmur and rose to a roar. Serena Vance. The Serena Vance. I watched the color leave Jessica's face. She looked like she was going to faint. Her knees buckled, and she slumped against the podium, the microphone feeding back again with a low hum. I turned back to Marcus. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice cool and even. I stepped around him. I walked to the stairs leading up to the stage. I ascended slowly. The red train of my dress followed me like a river of blood. I walked up to the podium. Jessica shrank away from me, stumbling back on her good leg, clutching her crutches. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated terror. I reached out and took the microphone from her trembling hand. She did not fight me. She did not scream. She was small. She was nothing. I stood in the center of the stage. The light hit the diamond at my throat and sent sparks flying into the crowd. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at Arthur Sterling, who was standing and clapping slowly, a look of profound respect on his face. Then I looked down at Dante. He was on his knees, not in prayer, but in collapse. I brought the microphone to my lips. "I am sorry for the interruption," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "But I believe there has been a misunderstanding about who exactly is paying the bill tonight." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was painful. "And since I am the one signing the checks, I think it is time we audited the account." I signaled the projection booth. The screen behind me lit up. The slide was not a fashion projection. It was a bank statement. And the show began. The stairs leading up to the stage were only 5 steps high, but for the King family, they represented the final ascent to the gallows. I ascended them slowly. Every step I took was a deliberate strike against the years of humiliation I had endured. The train of my red Valentino gown flowed behind me like a river of blood spilling over the edge of the platform. The silence in the grand ballroom was heavy and suffocating. 500 people watched without blinking. They watched the woman they thought was a nobody climb to the highest point in the room to reclaim her throne. I reached the podium. Jessica was trembling so violently that the microphone stand was rattling. Up close, she looked even worse than she did from the floor. Her sweat had cut tracks through her foundation. Her eyes were wide and dilated, filled with the primal terror of a trapped animal. She clutched her crutches like they were weapons, but we both knew she was unarmed. She had brought lies to a gunfight, and I had brought the truth. I did not ask for the microphone. I simply reached out and took it. Jessica's fingers were stiff-locked around the metal stem. For a fraction of a second, she resisted. It was a pathetic reflex, the last gasp of her dying ego. I locked eyes with her. I did not blink. I did not speak. I simply increased the pressure of my grip. She looked into my face and saw something she had never seen before. She saw the chairman. She saw the entity that owned her debt, her venue, and her future. Her hand went limp. She let go. She stumbled back, hitting her injured leg against the stool. She let out a small whimper, but it was swallowed by the silence of the room. I stepped up to the microphone. The feedback whined for a split second, then cleared. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the confused investors. I saw the curious socialites. I saw Arthur Sterling standing in the front row, his arms crossed, waiting for justice. And I saw Dante and Lucille huddled at their table, looking like they wished the floor would open up and swallow them whole. I took a breath. The air tasted sweet. "Apologies, everyone," I said, my voice smooth and commanding, ringing through the cavernous hall. "This presentation on business ethics has some data errors." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. They sensed the shift. They knew this was not a technical difficulty. This was a hostile takeover. I continued, my voice hardening into steel. "You have been listening to Jessica King speak about the values of her company. She told you about transparency. She told you about legacy. She told you that the King family is built on a foundation of trust." I turned slightly to look at Jessica, who was cowering in the shadows at the back of the stage. But in the world of venture capital, we have a saying: trust is good, verification is better. And tonight I would like to verify a few things. I reached into the leather folder I had carried onto the stage. I pulled out a small black remote control. Jessica saw it. Her eyes bulged. She stepped forward, one hand reached out in a desperate plea. "Serena, please," she whispered hoarsely. "Don't do this. We can talk. I will give you anything." I looked at her. "You have nothing to give Jessica," I said away from the mic so only she could hear. "Because you own nothing." I pointed the remote at the massive LED screen behind us. The screen that had been displaying the Jess Kuchar logo flickered. The image distorted, then went black. A second later, a new video file began to play. The image was crystal clear, high-definition footage taken from a concealed camera. The timestamp in the corner read, "Yesterday, 2:15 p.m." The audio boomed through the ballroom speakers, crisp and unmistakable. It was the interior of the Alpine Sanctuary sauna. On the screen, Jessica was sitting on the wooden bench, wrapped in a white towel. She looked relaxed, arrogant, and cruel. I watched the real Jessica on stage cover her mouth with her hands. She let out a strangled sob. On the screen, the recorded Jessica picked up her phone. "Allô, maman," she said. The audience gasped. They recognized the voice. They recognized the attitude. "Yes, I am in the sauna," the recorded Jessica said, laughing. "She is here. She is asleep, passed out like a peasant after a long shift." I looked out at the crowd. I saw shock registering on the faces of the investors. They were seeing the woman who just claimed to be a saint, mocking her own sister-in-law. But that was just the appetizer. "Did you get the bags?" Lucille's voice crackled through the speakers. "Of course," the recorded. Jessica scoffed. "The idiot paid for everything. $40,000, maman. I told you she was desperate for our approval." She handed over her card like a good little dog. A low murmur of disgust rippled through the room. I saw Arthur Sterling shake his head, his face twisting in distaste. I looked down at Dante. He was staring at the screen, his face pale as death. He knew what was coming next. On the screen, the conversation turned to business. Good, Lucille said. But the bags are not enough. We need the liquidity for the company. The payroll is due on Monday. I know, Jessica snapped. That is why tonight is crucial. I need Dante to sign the papers for the house. The house, Lucille asked. Which house? Their house, Jessica said, and her voice on the speakers was filled with venom. The Colonial in Connecticut. I had my lawyer draft a power of attorney and a second mortgage application. I am going to tell Dante it is just some updated insurance paperwork for the trip. He never reads anything. The ballroom erupted. People were standing up now, pointing at the screen. The investors who had been considering giving Jessica millions of dollars were now looking at her like she was radioactive. Fraud, conspiracy, theft. It was all there recorded in her own voice. But I was not done. I pressed the button on the remote again. The video paused. I leaned into the microphone. That was Exhibit A, I said calmly over the rising noise of the crowd. Conspiracy to commit bank fraud and grand larceny. But Jessica is right about one thing. She needs a partner. Every crime needs an accomplice. I looked directly at Dante. And sadly, that brings us to my husband. I pressed the button again. The screen went black. This time there was no video, only audio. But the waveform danced across the screen, visualizing the betrayal. It was the recording from the hotel suite last night. Hey, babe, Dante's voice filled the room. It sounded shaky, nervous, and weak. What is this about paperwork? My own voice asked on the recording, sounding tired and trusting. We are going skiing, Dante said. But the resort has new liability protocols. Since the accident last year, they make everyone sign waivers. Medical release forms, insurance verifications, blah blah blah. It is standard. The lie hung in the air, gross and palpable. On the recording, the sound of paper shuffling was loud. Here, just sign at the tabs, I marked, Dante urged. It saves time so you do not have to read through pages of legal jargon. I stopped the audio. I looked down at Dante. He was sobbing now, his head in his hands. He could not look at me. He could not look at anyone. I spoke into the microphone, my voice dripping with ice. That document was not a liability waiver. It was a general, durable power of attorney. My husband tried to trick me into giving him full control of my assets so he could liquidate my life savings to pay off his sister's debts. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. He tried to sell my home. He tried to steal my future. And he did it while looking me in the eye and telling me he loved me. I turned back to Jessica. She was slumped on the floor now, weeping openly. You wanted investors, Jessica, I said. You wanted transparency. Well, here it is. Your financials are fake, your inventory is non-existent, and your moral compass is broken beyond repair. I looked out at the crowd. My name is Serena Vance, I said, and I am the chairman of Onyx Horizon. I own this hotel. I own the debt that Jess Kuchar has defaulted on, and as of this morning, I have forwarded all of this evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the District Attorney's Office. I pointed at the screen, where the paused image of Jessica's face loomed large and ugly. This presentation is over, I said. And so is your company. I signaled the booth to cut the feed. The screen went black, plunging the stage back into the harsh white spotlight. But the silence was gone. The room was in chaos. People were shouting. Security was moving in. Jessica looked up at me, her mascara running down her face in black tears. Why, she whispered. Why did you wait? Why didn't you stop us? I looked down at her. I smoothed the silk of my red dress. Because, Jessica, I said quietly, if I had stopped you earlier, you would have just been a liar. I waited until you were a felon. I turned my back on her. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked for Marcus. Get them out of my sight, I said into the microphone one last time. And then I dropped it. The microphone hit the floor with a loud thud that sounded like a gavel striking a block. Judgment had been delivered. The echo of the microphone hitting the stage floor was still bouncing off the gilded ceiling when the second wave of the storm hit. I stood at the edge of the platform, looking down at the wreckage I had caused. Jessica was slumped against the podium, her white dress looking like a surrender flag amidst the ruins of her reputation. Dante was on his knees, his hands covering his face, trying to hide from the hundreds of eyes that were now dissecting his every failure. The room was buzzing with a chaotic energy, a mixture of shock and the thrill of witnessing a public execution. But the final verdict had not yet been read. Arthur Sterling stood up from his table in the front row. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket with a slow, deliberate movement that drew every eye in the room. He was a man who commanded attention not by shouting, but by the sheer weight of his presence. He walked to the center of the aisle, standing directly between the trembling King family and the rest of the polite society. He did not need a microphone. His voice was a baritone weapon, honed in boardrooms and federal hearings. It carried to the back of the hall with crystal clarity. "Ms. King," Arthur said, addressing Jessica without looking at her. Jessica lifted her head. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks like war paint gone wrong. She looked at him with a desperate, hopeful flicker in her eyes. She thought maybe, just maybe, he was going to save her. She thought he was a man of the old guard who would step in to protect a damsel in distress regardless of the facts. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered, reaching a hand out toward him. "Please, you have to understand. It is a misunderstanding. Serena is lying. She doctored those tapes. We can explain." Arthur raised a hand. It was a simple gesture, but it silenced her instantly. "There is nothing to explain." Ms. King, Arthur said, his tone icy and devoid of pity. "In my 30 years of finance, I have seen bad business plans. I have seen incompetence. I have seen desperation. But I have rarely seen moral bankruptcy this complete." He looked around the room, addressing the investors who had been circling Jessica all night. "For the record," Arthur announced, "the Aurelia Fund officially declines the investment proposal from Jess Couture. We do not partner with liabilities, and we certainly do not partner with criminals." The word criminal hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Jessica flinched as if he had slapped her. "Criminal," she stammered. "That is slander. You cannot say that. I will sue you." Arthur let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You are welcome to try," he said, "but I would advise you to save your legal fees. You are going to need them for your defense attorney." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "You see, Ms. King," he continued, "when Ms. Vance approached me yesterday in the lobby, I did not just see a porter being mistreated. I saw my chairman giving me a signal, and when the chairman signals, I investigate." He unfolded the paper. "My team spent the last 24 hours auditing the financials you sent to my office. We cross-referenced your inventory claims with your shipping manifests. We checked your offshore accounts against your tax filings." He looked at her with pure disgust. "It is a Ponzi scheme, Ms. King. You are paying old investors with new money. You are claiming assets that do not exist. And you are using stolen personal funds to plug the holes in a sinking ship." Jessica was shaking her head violently. "No. No. That is not true. It is creative accounting. Everyone does it." "Not everyone," Arthur said, his voice hardening. "And certainly not on my watch." He took a step closer to the stage. "Which is why I did not just reject your proposal. At 9 o'clock this morning, my office contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We also sent a complete dossier of your fraudulent activities to the Securities and Exchange Commission." The room erupted. The gasp was collective and horrified. The FBI, the SEC. These were not civil lawsuits. These were federal agencies. This was prison time. Jessica let out a sound that was not human. It was a high-pitched keen of pure terror. She looked at Dante, but he was rocking back and forth on the floor, mumbling to himself. She looked at the crowd, but they were backing away from her table as if fraud was contagious. They are on their way. Arthur finished checking his watch. In fact, if the weather has not delayed them, the federal agents should be arriving at the resort gates right about now. He turned his back on her. He looked up at me where I stood on the stage. He gave me a nod, a silent acknowledgement that the job was done. I looked down at the King family table. Lucille was the only one left standing. She was gripping the back of her chair, her knuckles white. Her face had gone the color of old ash. She was watching her world disintegrate in real time. The reputation she had preened over the social standing she had worshipped, the legacy she had killed for it, was all turning to dust. She looked at the crowd. She saw her friends turning their backs. She saw the waiters whispering. She saw the end of her life as she knew it. And Lucille King did what she always did when reality became too difficult to handle. She decided to exit the scene. I saw it coming before it happened. I saw her eyes roll back. I saw her hand flutter to her chest in a gesture so theatrical it belonged in a silent movie. Oh, she gasped loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My heart, I cannot. She swayed. She took a step back, making sure she had a clear landing zone. Mother Jessica screamed from the stage. Lucille crumpled. She went down in a heap of silver sequins and expensive perfume. She landed gracefully, avoiding the table leg, managing to fan her dress out slightly as she hit the floor. Mom Dante yelled, scrambling on his hands and knees toward her. Mom, wake up! Someone help! She is having a heart attack! The room descended into chaos. People were shouting for a doctor. Dante was slapping his mother's cheeks. Jessica was wailing from the stage, unable to go down the stairs on her crutches. I stood above it all, watching the performance. I knew Lucille's medical history better than she did. I paid her insurance premiums. I knew she had the heart of an ox and the blood pressure of a teenager. This was not a medical emergency. This was a tactical retreat. She was playing dead because being unconscious was preferable to being held accountable. Arthur Sterling looked down at the prone figure of Lucille. He did not rush to help. He did not look concerned. He looked at me with a raised eyebrow. I leaned over the edge of the stage. Dante, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Serena, help her, please. She is dying. She is not dying, Dante, I said coldly. She is embarrassed. There is a difference. You are a monster, he screamed. How can you be so cold? This is your fault. You killed her. I walked to the stairs. I descended slowly, my dress rustling around me. The crowd parted again, giving me a wide berth. I walked up to where Lucille lay on the floor. Her eyelids were fluttering slightly. Her breathing was even and shallow. I crouched down beside her. I leaned close to her ear so only she and Dante could hear. You can stop acting, Lucille, I whispered. The paramedics are coming. And when they hook you up to the monitor, everyone is going to see that your heart is perfectly fine. It is going to be very awkward when they realize you are faking it to avoid the FBI. Lucille's eyes snapped open. For a second, she glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask slipped completely. There was no frail old woman there, just a viper who had been cornered. Then she squeezed her eyes shut again and let out a moan. Dante. Get me out of here, she hissed under her breath. Get me to the room, now. Dante blinked, confused by her sudden resurrection. Mom. Move, you idiot, she whispered venomously. Before the police get here. Dante looked at me. He looked at his mother. The realization that she was faking it washed over him, adding one more layer of betrayal to his night. He stood up. He grabbed her under the arms. Help me! He shouted to the crowd, his voice cracking with shame. Please, I need to get her to the room. Two waiters stepped forward, hesitantly helping him lift Lucille. She played her part, letting her head loll back, dragging her feet. I stood up and smoothed my dress. Make way, I said to the crowd. Let them pass. The sea of people parted. It was a walk of shame unlike anything Aspen had ever seen. Dante struggling under the weight of his faking mother, Jessica hobbling behind them on her crutches, sobbing and looking over her shoulder at the doors, terrified that the feds were already there. They moved toward the exit, leaving a trail of humiliation in their wake. Arthur Sterling moved to stand beside me. "That was quite a performance," he murmured, watching them flee. "Which part?" I asked. "The speech or the fainting?" "All of it," he said. "But I think the finale is still to come." I looked at the doors as they swung shut behind the King family. "Yes," I said. "They are running back to the suite. They think they can pack. They think they can hide." Arthur signaled to Marcus. Marcus nodded and spoke into his radio. I turned to Arthur. "They are going to find that their key cards do not work," I said. "And they are going to find that the valet has lost their car keys. And in about 10 minutes, they are going to find that the only way out of this resort is in the back of a squad car." Arthur smiled. "Can I buy you a drink, Chairman?" I looked at the empty stage. I looked at the investors who were now looking at me with fear and respect. "Not yet, Arthur," I said. "I have one more document to deliver." I picked up the leather folder from the table where I had left it. "I need to hand Dante his severance package." "Severance package?" Arthur asked, confused. I held up the divorce papers. "Total liquidation," I said. I turned and began to walk toward the exit, following the path of destruction my in-laws had left behind. The ballroom was silent as I left. They knew they had witnessed a massacre, and they knew the Queen was going to finish the job. The corridor leading away from the grand ballroom was long and lined with mirrors that reflected my red dress back at me 1,000 times. I looked like an army of blood and vengeance marching toward the exit. Behind me, the sounds of the chaotic gala were fading, replaced by the frantic slapping of leather soles on marble. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. I knew that desperate stride. I knew the heavy, panicked breathing. For 5 years I had attuned my body to the rhythms of Dante King, waiting for him to come home, waiting for him to love me. Now I was waiting for him to break. "Serena, wait." His voice cracked, echoing off the high ceilings. I stopped. I did not turn. I simply ceased moving, letting the silence stretch out before me like a red carpet. I heard him skid to a halt behind me. I heard the rustle of his tuxedo, the fabric likely damp with the sweat of a man who has just watched his life incinerate. "Serena, please," he panted. "You cannot just walk away, not like this." I turned slowly. Dante was a wreck. His tie was undone, hanging loosely around his neck like a noose. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was wild. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the man I had married. The charm, the handsome face, the promise of a future. But it was like looking at a billboard that had been left out in the rain too long. The colors were faded, and the structure was rotting. He took a step toward me, reaching out a hand. "Baby," he whispered, using the pet name he knew I used to melt for. "You have to listen to me. I did not want to do it. You know I did not want to do it. It was Jessica. It was Mom. They forced me." I raised an eyebrow. "They forced you?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Did they hold a gun to your head, Dante? Did they drug you? Or did they just dangle the promise of maintaining your lifestyle in front of you like a carrot?" Dante flinched. He dropped to his knees right there in the hallway of the hotel I owned. It was a pathetic gesture meant to elicit sympathy. He grasped the hem of my red dress, burying his face in the silk. "They manipulated me, Serena," he sobbed. "You know how they are. They get inside my head. Jessica said we would lose everything. She said the business was failing, and if we did not get the loan, Mom would have a stroke. I was trying to save the family. I was trying to save us." I looked down at the top of his head. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a cold, clinical detachment. "Save us?" I asked. "By stealing from me, by selling the house I paid for, by liquidating the savings I worked for." "That is an interesting definition of saving us, Dante." He looked up, his face streaked with tears. "I was going to pay you back," he pleaded. "I swear. Once the investment came through, once Jessica's company went public, I was going to put it all back. I just needed to borrow it. I love you, Serena. I love you more than anything. You are my wife. We are a team. I laughed. It was a sharp, short sound that made him recoil. A team, I said. I reached into the leather folder I was carrying. Let us talk about teamwork, Dante. Let us talk about the document you made me sign last night. The one you lied about. The one you said was a liability waiver for skiing. Dante's eyes darted to the folder. A flicker of hope crossed his face. He thought he still had leverage. He thought that even if I was angry, he still held the legal power to control my assets. I tore that up, he lied. I was never going to use it, Serena, I swear. I just signed it to get Jessica off my back. You are lying, I said simply. You faxed it to the bank at 8 o'clock this morning. My security team intercepted the transmission log. You tried to drain the accounts, Dante. You tried to take it all. He swallowed hard, realizing he was cornered. But I am your husband, he stammered. The law says community property. Even without the power of attorney, half of what you have is mine. We are married, Serena. You cannot just cut me off. I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has already eaten. Actually, Dante, I can. I pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder. Do you remember the pen I used to sign that document last night? I asked. The silver one I took from my purse. Dante blinked, confused by the change in topic. The pen? What does the pen have to do with anything? I twirled the paper in my fingers. That pen contains a proprietary ink compound developed for high-security architectural markups. It is designed to be highly visible for exactly 12 hours. After that, the chemical bonds react with oxygen and destabilize. I held the paper out to him. Look at it, Dante. He took the paper with trembling hands. It was the general durable power of attorney. He recognized the font. He recognized the heavy legal bond paper. He looked at the bottom of the page where the signature line was. It was blank. Pristine white paper. Not a smudge. Not a trace of blue ink. My signature was gone. Dante stared at it, rubbing his thumb over the empty line. It is gone, he whispered. It evaporated at 10 o'clock this morning, I said. 2 hours after you sent the fax, which means the document the bank received is now a blank form. It is invalid. It is worthless. Just like your promises. Dante crumpled the paper in his fist. He looked up at me, and the sadness was gone, replaced by a flash of the entitled anger I knew so well. You set me up, he hissed. You knew. You knew the whole time, and you let me do it. I did not let you do anything, Dante. I corrected him. I gave you a choice. I gave you a rope. You chose to hang yourself with it. He scrambled to his feet, his face twisting into a snarl. Fine. You tricked me, but you are still my wife. And you are worth billions, apparently. If you want a divorce, it is going to cost you. I will drag this out in court for years. I will take half of Onyx Horizon. I will take the penthouse. I will take everything because I know your secrets, Serena. I stared at him, unimpressed. You know nothing, Dante. You do not even know who I am. I reached back into the folder. I pulled out a thick, stapled document. It was heavy. It landed in his chest with a thud as I shoved it at him. He grabbed it reflexively. What is this? He demanded. That I said is the real paperwork. He looked at the cover page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. But more importantly, I continued pointing to the second document clipped behind it. That is the prenuptial agreement. Dante laughed a hysterical sound. We never signed a prenup, Serena. I remember. Mom said you were too poor to need one. I stepped closer to him. You are right. We did not sign one when we got married because I was pretending to be poor. But do you remember 3 years ago when I lent you the money to open your private practice? The $200,000 you said was a loan. Dante frowned, trying to recall. Yeah. So what? I made you sign a loan agreement, I said. You didn't read it, did you? You just signed it because you wanted the check. Dante went pale. Buried in Clause 14 of that loan agreement was a stipulation. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. It stated that in the event of any infidelity, financial fraud, or criminal activity committed by the borrower against the lender, the borrower forfeits all claims to marital assets acquired during the union. I tapped the paper in his hand. You committed financial fraud this morning, Dante. You committed criminal conspiracy, and by doing so, you triggered Clause 14. I watched the realization crush him. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the legal jargon. This cannot be legal, he stammered. No judge will uphold this. It was drafted by the same firm that represents the President of the United States, I said. It is ironclad. I stepped back, creating distance between us. So let us review the math, Dante. I held up one finger. The house in Connecticut. I bought it through a trust. You never paid a dime of the mortgage. It is mine. I held up a second finger. The cars. Leased under my company name. They are being repossessed as we speak. I held up a third finger. Your medical practice. You defaulted on the loan I gave you. My lawyers filed the lien an hour ago. I own your equipment. I own your office lease. I own the chair you sit in. Dante was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face again. No, no, Serena, please. You cannot do this. I am a doctor. I have a reputation. You have a criminal record pending, I corrected him. And as for the divorce settlement, I paused, looking him up and down, taking in the tuxedo I had bought, the shoes I had paid for, the watch I had gifted him. The division of assets is based on contribution. I contributed everything. You contributed betrayal. I leaned in close so I could smell the fear on him. So the final number is 0, Dante. You get $0, 0 properties, 0 support. I turned on my heel. I suggest you start walking, I said over my shoulder. It is a long way down the mountain, and I hear the motel is full. Serena, he screamed, reaching out for me one last time. I did not stop. I did not slow down. I walked toward the elevators, leaving him alone in the hallway, holding a stack of papers that detailed exactly how he had lost the best thing that ever happened to him. Behind me, I heard the sound of paper tearing and the thud of a body hitting the floor. But I kept walking. My red dress swirled around my ankles, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt light. I felt clean. I pressed the call button for the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. Going down, Dante, I whispered, as the doors slid shut, cutting off his wails. But I was going up. The elevator ride down to the lobby was the longest 30 seconds of Dante King's life, but for me, it was a victory lap. I stood in the corner of the polished metal box, watching the numbers descend. I adjusted the diamond necklace at my throat, feeling the cool metal against my skin. I had just dismantled my marriage and destroyed a fraudulent company in front of 500 people, but my pulse was steady. I was not done yet. There was one final loose end to tie up: the bill. When the doors slid open, the lobby of the Aspen Peak Resort was a scene of controlled chaos. The storm outside was raging against the glass, battering the heavy doors with snow and wind, as if trying to break in. Inside, the atmosphere was even colder. My in-laws were huddled near the valet desk, looking like refugees from a high society shipwreck. Lucille had miraculously recovered from her heart attack the moment she realized there was no audience left to pity her. She was standing by the door, clutching her fur coat tightly around her, frantic to leave before the authorities arrived. Dante was pacing back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear, likely trying to call his lawyer, or perhaps a friend who still had money. And Jessica. Jessica was sitting in a wheelchair she had demanded from the concierge. She sat there with her leg propped up, clinging to her stolen victimhood as if it were a shield. She looked small and pathetic, her white dress stained with sweat and the ruin of her reputation. They were waiting for their car. They were waiting to escape into the night, to drive away and pretend this nightmare had never happened. But the car was not coming. I walked across the marble floor, my red dress flowing behind me like a warning flag. I did not hide. I did not sneak. I wanted them to see me. Marcus stood by the revolving doors. He looked like a sentinel, his hands clasped behind his back, his face an impenetrable mask of professional courtesy. He saw me approach and gave a subtle nod. "Where is the car?" Dante shouted at the valet, a young man named Leo, who looked terrified. "We have been waiting 10 minutes. Bring the Range Rover around now." "I am sorry, sir," Leo stammered, looking at Marcus for support. "I cannot do that." "What do you mean you cannot do that?" Jessica screeched from her wheelchair. "It is our car. We gave you the keys. Go get it." Marcus stepped forward. His movements were smooth and deliberate. He held a leather folio in his hand, the kind usually reserved for presenting wine lists or exclusive contracts. "Mr. King." Mrs. King, Marcus said, his voice cutting through their noise. "There seems to be a misunderstanding regarding your departure." "Get out of my way," Marcus, Dante snapped. "We are leaving. If you do not get my car right now, I will sue this hotel for unlawful imprisonment." Marcus did not blink. He did not flinch. He simply opened the leather folio. "You are free to leave at any time," Mr. King, Marcus said politely. "However, resort policy dictates that all outstanding accounts must be settled before vehicles are released from the valet. And currently, your account is flagged as delinquent. Delinquent." Jessica laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Do you know who we are? Put it on the tab. My company pays the bill." Marcus looked down at her with a mixture of pity and disdain. "Your company, Ms. King, has been flagged by our credit department as insolvent, and the personal credit card on file has been declined." He extended the folio toward her. "Here is the final invoice." Jessica snatched the paper from his hand. She looked at it, expecting a standard hotel bill, maybe a few $1,000s for the room service and the spa. I watched her eyes widen. I watched her jaw drop. I watched the color drain from her face until she looked like a corpse in a wheelchair. $150,000, she whispered. Dante stopped pacing. He grabbed the paper from her. What, he yelled. "That is impossible. We have only been here 2 days. There must be a mistake." "There is no mistake," Marcus said calmly. "If you look at the itemized breakdown, sir, you will see the charges are quite accurate." I stepped closer, stopping just outside their circle. I wanted to hear every word. Dante read the list, his hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "Presidential suite rental for 3 nights at $25,000 per night," Marcus recited from memory. "Plus the adjoining rooms for your mother and sister. Plus the expedited booking fee." "We did not stay 3 nights, Dante argued. "We are leaving now." "The cancellation policy is 48 hours, Marcus replied smoothly. "You are leaving early. You still pay for the booking." Dante looked further down the list. $15,000 for wine, he choked out. "We did not drink $15,000 worth of wine." "Ah yes," Marcus said. "The Chateau Margaux, 1995. A bottle was ordered to your table last night. And according to the witness statements, Ms. King knocked over a glass and then instructed the staff to put the bottle on her tab. We charged you for the bottle and the cleaning fee for the antique Persian rug." Jessica made a strangulated noise in her throat. "And then there is the matter of the damages." Marcus continued, his voice turning harder. "Damages!" Lucille spoke up for the first time, her voice shrill. "We did not break anything." "Emotional damages," Marcus corrected her. He pointed to the line item. $10,000. "You verbally abused my staff," Marcus said, looking directly at Jessica. "You insulted the housekeeping team. You berated the waitstaff. You assaulted a porter. In this establishment, we value our employees. That fee will be distributed among the staff members you mistreated as compensation for the hostile work environment you created." I smiled. That was my favorite part. "But the biggest charge is at the bottom," Dante said, his finger trembling as he pointed to the last entry. $40,000. Miscellaneous retail. He looked up at me. His eyes were wild. The Hermes bags. You paid for those. I stepped forward into the light. Did I, Dante? I asked softly. He flinched at the sound of my voice. You used your card, he said. I saw you. You bought the bags for Jessica. I shook my head slowly. No, Dante. You forced me to use a card. You coerced me. You leveraged your emotional manipulation to make me pay for goods I did not want for a woman who hates me. I looked at Marcus. When a financial transaction is made under duress, I explained like a teacher speaking to a slow student, it is considered fraud. And since I am the bank, I have flagged that transaction as theft. Jessica gasped, clutching the arms of her wheelchair. You reported the bags as stolen. I reported the money as stolen, I corrected her. Because it was. You stole from me. The fact that you converted that stolen money into handbags is your problem, not mine. Since you are in possession of the goods, the resort has charged the value of the theft to your room bill. I leaned in closer. So you owe the hotel $40,000 for the bags, Jessica. Plus the room. Plus the wine. Plus the cruelty. Dante stared at the paper. $150,000. He looked at the valet stand. The snow was falling harder outside, burying the world in white. Here, he said, reaching for his wallet. His hands were fumbling. I will put it on my Amex. It has a high limit. Just run it so we can get out of here. He pulled out his platinum card, the one he was so proud of, the one he used to flash at dinners to prove he was a big shot. He handed it to Marcus. Marcus took the card. He walked over to the mobile terminal on the desk. He inserted the chip. We all waited. The machine beeped, a low, dissonant tone that signaled failure. Marcus looked at the screen. Declined. Try it again, Dante said, sweat beading on his forehead. It is a chip error. Swipe it. Marcus swiped it. Declined. He handed the card back to Dante. The issuer indicates a hard lock on the account, sir. Dante looked at me. Why is my card locked, Serena? I shrugged my shoulders, the silk of my dress shifting with the movement. I imagine it has something to do with the divorce petition I filed, I said. And the foreclosure. And the business lien. When assets are frozen, Dante, they are frozen. You have zero credit. You have zero cash. You are effectively bankrupt. Lucille let out a moan and sat down heavily on a bench near the door. We are trapped, she whispered. We are trapped here. Jessica started to cry again. Real tears this time. Tears of a woman who realizes her toys have been taken away. What are we going to do? She sobbed. We cannot pay this. Marcus closed the folio with a snap. In that case, he said, his voice turning icy, I am afraid I cannot release your vehicle. The car will be held as collateral against the debt. He gestured to the door. You are welcome to walk. Walk? Dante shouted. In this storm, it is 5 miles to the nearest town. We will freeze to death. That is a risk you will have to assess, Marcus said, indifferent. But you cannot stay here. You are trespassing on private property. And since you cannot pay for your services, I must ask you to vacate the premises immediately. He signaled to the security guards. 4 large men stepped out from the shadows. They did not look friendly. They looked like bouncers ready to clear out the trash. Dante looked at the guards. He looked at the storm outside. He looked at his mother shivering in her fur coat and his sister crippled in a wheelchair. And then he looked at me. Serena. He pleaded, his voice breaking into a whimper. You own the hotel. You can waive the bill. Just let us go. Please. Do not make us walk in the snow. I looked at him. I thought about the night he made me sleep in the guest room because I had the flu and he didn't want to get sick. I thought about the way he let his mother criticize my cooking. I thought about the moment on the mountain when he left me alone to chase after his lying sister. I thought about the word loyalty. I walked up to him. I stood so close I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sour champagne. I could waive the bill, I said quietly. His eyes lit up with hope. But I won't. I stepped back. You wanted to live like a king, Dante. Kings pay their debts. I turned to Marcus. Escort them out. Marcus nodded. Please remove these individuals from the property, he said to the guards. No. Jessica screamed as a guard grabbed the handles of her wheelchair. You cannot do this. I am injured. The guard pushed the wheelchair toward the revolving doors. Another guard took Dante by the arm. A third gently but firmly guided Lucille. They were being evicted, not with violence, but with the unstoppable force of bureaucracy and consequences. I stood in the center of the lobby and watched. I watched as the automatic doors spun. I watched as the blast of cold air hit them. I watched as Dante stumbled out into the snow, his tuxedo shoes slipping on the ice. I watched as Jessica was wheeled onto the sidewalk, the snow instantly coating her hair. I watched as the valet locked the doors behind them. They stood there on the curb, three silhouettes against the blinding white of the blizzard. They had no car, they had no money, they had nowhere to go, to. And then, through the howling of the wind, I heard a new sound. Sirens. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, cutting through the storm. They were getting closer. Arthur Sterling had been right. The federal agents were on time. I watched Dante turn his head toward the lights. I saw his shoulders slump. He knew. He looked back through the glass doors at me one last time. I was standing in the warmth, surrounded by gold and crystal, wearing a red dress that cost more than his life. I raised my hand, and I waved. It was not a wave of goodbye, it was a wave of dismissal. I turned my back on the window. I walked toward the elevator. The bill had been presented, and now it was time for them to pay. The blizzard outside had turned the world into a blur of violent white, but inside the lobby of the Aspen Peak Resort, the arrival of the federal agents was precise and clinical. I stood near the elevators, my red dress a stark contrast to the gray tactical gear of the officers who burst through the revolving doors. There were 4 of them. They moved with the heavy authority of men who do not ask questions. They did not look at the chandeliers. They did not look at the art. They looked only for one thing. Jessica King. She was still in the wheelchair near the entrance, shivering as the cold draft from the opening doors hit her. When she saw the badges, she tried to stand up. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to run, but her injured leg buckled, and she collapsed back into the seat with a sharp cry. Ms. Jessica King, the lead agent, barked, his voice cutting through the lobby chatter. Jessica shook her head violently. No, no, please. There has been a mistake. My brother did it. Talk to him. She pointed a trembling finger at Dante, who was standing a few feet away, hugging his arms against his chest. Dante looked at her with pure horror. You are blaming me, he screamed, his voice cracking. You told me it was legal. You told me it was bridge financing. I am placing you under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The agent continued, ignoring their domestic dispute. He pulled a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. The sound of the cuffs clicking onto Jessica's wrists was loud and final. She wailed. It was not a cry of remorse. It was the sound of a narcissist realizing the mirror had broken. Mom, she shrieked, looking at Lucille. Do something. Call Daddy. Call someone. Lucille stood frozen against the wall. She looked at her daughter being manhandled by the police. She looked at the guests who were filming the scene on their phones. And then she did the only thing she knew how to do. She turned her head away. She pretended she did not know the woman in the handcuffs. The agents hauled Jessica out of the wheelchair. She hobbled between them, dragging her feet, her white dress now gray with slush from the floor. I am innocent, she screamed as they dragged her toward the waiting squad car outside. Serena did this. She set me up. The doors spun. The wind howled. And then she was gone. Dante and Lucille were left standing in the wake of her arrest. They looked small. They looked breakable. Marcus stepped forward. Mr. King, Mrs. King. he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You are no longer guests of this resort. You have been trespassed. If you remain in the lobby, you will be arrested for unlawful entry." Dante looked at Marcus. He looked at the storm raging outside. "But we have no car," he whispered. "We have no coats." Marcus signaled to the security guards. "That is unfortunate," he said, "but it is not my problem." The guards moved in. They did not touch them, but their presence was a wall of force pushing them toward the exit. I watched Dante stumble toward the door. He looked back one last time, searching the lobby for me. He wanted to beg. He wanted to apologize. He wanted me to save him. But I was already walking away. I took the private elevator up to the penthouse. The ride was smooth and silent. When I stepped out into the warmth of my suite, the fire was crackling in the hearth. Elena had left a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir open on the table to breathe. I poured a glass. The liquid was dark and rich. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the front drive of the resort. From 20 floors up, the tragedy below looked like a silent movie. I saw the flashing blue and red lights of the police cruiser as it pulled away, taking Jessica to a federal holding cell. And then I saw them. Two small dark figures standing on the curb. Dante and Lucille. The wind was whipping their clothes. Lucille was clutching her fur coat, but the wind was tearing at it. Dante was in his tuxedo, shivering violently. They were huddled together, not out of love, but out of survival. They looked like ghosts. Ghosts of a life I used to want. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like oak and victory. I watched as a taxi pulled up. I saw Dante frantically waving his arms. The taxi slowed down. The driver likely saw their disheveled state, saw the lack of luggage, saw the desperation. The taxi did not stop. It drove right past them, disappearing into the whiteout. They were alone. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. For years they had left me out in the cold. They had frozen me out of conversations, out of family photos, out of their hearts. They had made me feel small so they could feel big. Now the world was finally calibrated correctly. I watched them start to walk. They put their heads down against the wind and began to trudge down the long driveway toward the main road. It was a 5-mile walk to town. In these conditions, it would take them hours. They would survive, but they would never be the same. The snow was erasing their footprints as fast as they made them. I turned away from the window. I walked back to the fire. The warmth wrapped around me like a blanket. I was Serena Vance. I was the chairman. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Inside, warm and free. The storm could rage all it wanted. I had already weathered mine. The sun over the Indian Ocean was a different kind of gold than the sun over Aspen. In Colorado, the light had been sharp and judging, illuminating every flaw and every secret. Here in Bali, the light was warm and forgiving, wrapping around the body like a lover's embrace. I sat on the edge of the infinity pool, looking out at the horizon where the turquoise water met the sky. My toes dangled in the water, creating small ripples that traveled outward until they disappeared. It had been 90 days since I walked out of the grand ballroom in my red dress. 90 days since I burned my old life to the ground and walked away from the ashes. Behind me in the open-air living room of the private villa, I could hear the sounds of my real family. Not the family of blood or marriage, but the family of choice. Marcus was laughing. It was a sound I rarely heard back in the States, where he was always on high alert. Here, wearing a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, he looked younger, lighter. He was grilling fresh seafood on the terrace, trading jokes with Elena. Elena was currently trying to convince Liam, my serious chief legal counsel, that he needed to wear sunscreen. Liam was protesting, claiming that lawyers were naturally repelled by the sun, but he was smiling. These were the people who had stood by me. They had not asked for my money. They had not asked for my status. They had simply asked how they could help. I took a sip of coconut water and leaned back on my hands. "Ms. Vance," Liam called out, walking over to the poolside holding a tablet. Sorry to interrupt the zen, but the final reports came in from New York. I did not flinch. 3 months ago, the sight of a legal document would have made my stomach turn. Now it was just business. Give me the headlines, Liam, I said, keeping my eyes on the ocean. Liam sat down on a lounge chair. The Securities and Exchange Commission has finalized their investigation into Jess Kuchar, he said. They found evidence of fraud totaling $12 million. Jessica accepted a plea deal this morning. I turned to look at him. A plea deal. 5 years in federal prison, Liam said, with eligibility for parole in 3. And she is permanently barred from serving as an officer of any public company. I nodded. It was justice. It was not cruel. It was simply the mathematical result of her actions. And Lucille, I asked. Liam scrolled down. The IRS seized the colonial house in Connecticut to pay back the taxes Jessica owed since she had used the property as collateral in her shell games. Lucille is currently living in a one-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport. She has been selling her jewelry to pay for a lawyer for Jessica. I thought about Lucille. I thought about her fur coats and her snobbery. I thought about the way she looked at me when she said I was lucky to be included. I wondered if she felt lucky now living in a world without the status she had worshipped. And Dante, I asked. Liam hesitated. He tapped the screen. The medical board revoked his license last month, he said. The fraud conviction meant he could no longer practice medicine in the state of Connecticut. He avoided jail time by testifying against his sister, but he is effectively unemployable in his field. I looked back at the water. Dante King. The man who wanted to be a king so badly, he became a pauper. Okay, Liam, I said. Close the file. Liam nodded. Considered it closed. He stood up to go back to the grill, but then he paused. Oh, one more thing. Your old phone number. The one we ported over to the burner phone just in case. It just received a text. I held out my hand. Let me see. Liam handed me the phone. It was a cheap black device, the kind we used for disposable communications. I looked at the screen. The number was unsaved, but I knew it by heart. I had dialed it every day for 5 years. I had texted it goodnight when he was working late. I had sent it photos of dinners I cooked that got cold, waiting for him. It was Dante. The message was long. It was a wall of text sent at 3 a.m. his time. Serena, it read. I know you probably will not see this. I am living in a basement apartment near the old clinic. I got a job doing data entry for an insurance company. It pays $12 an hour. I saw your picture in Forbes yesterday. You looked beautiful. You always looked beautiful. I scrolled down. I am sorry. I say it every day to the empty room. I am sorry I was weak. I am sorry I let them hurt you. I am drowning, Serena. I do not just mean money. I mean I am lost. I miss the way you used to look at me. I miss the way you made me feel safe. Can we just talk? I do not want money. I just want to hear your voice. Please, I have nobody. I stared at the words. A year ago, this text would have broken me. I would have read the desperation, and my heart would have softened. I would have thought that maybe he had changed. I would have thought that my love was strong enough to fix him. But the tropical sun has a way of illuminating the truth. He did not miss me. He missed the safety. He missed the woman who fixed his problems. He missed the cushion I placed between him and the hard reality of the world. He was alone not because I left him, but because he had never cultivated a single genuine relationship in his life. He had used people, and now that he had no use for them, they were gone. I felt a shadow fall over me. Marcus was standing there holding 2 plates of grilled snapper. Everything okay, boss? He asked. I looked up at him. I looked at the villa I had bought with my own success. I looked at the team that respected me. I looked at the peace I had built brick by brick. I looked back at the phone. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I felt nothing. It was the indifference of a mountain looking down at a pebble. Everything is perfect, Marcus, I said. I tapped the screen. I did not type a reply. I did not ask him how he was. I did not give him the closure he was begging for. Closure is a gift, and he could not afford my gifts anymore. I pressed the small icon in the corner. Block caller. The message disappeared. The connection was severed. The line went dead. I handed the phone back to Liam. Throw it in the ocean, I said. Liam didn't ask questions. He took the phone, walked to the edge of the terrace, and tossed it. I watched the black plastic device arc through the air. It sparkled for a second in the sunlight before it hit the water with a small, insignificant splash. It sank immediately down into the deep blue, disappearing into the coral and the sand. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, humid air. I stood up and walked over to the table where my friends were waiting. Elena poured me a glass of wine. To the future, she said, raising her glass. I raised mine. The crystal clinked with a sound like a bell. To the future, I said. I looked out at the view one last time. My in-laws had tried to exclude me. They had tried to tell me I did not belong in their room. They did not realize that I did not need their room. I could build my own house. They had tried to leave me behind in the snow, but in doing so, they had given me the greatest gift of all. They had forced me to keep walking until I found a place where I could stand tall. I took a sip of wine and smiled. Sometimes you have to let them abandon you. You have to let them lock the door. You have to let them drive away. Because it is only when you are left behind that you realize you are the one leading the way. It is only when they leave you that you are finally free to find yourself. And I had found her. She was strong. She was rich. She was happy. And she was never going back. Serena's journey reminds us that your value is never defined by how others treat you, but by what you refuse to tolerate. For years, she dimmed her light to fit into a family that was committed to misunderstanding her, only to realize that you cannot buy love from those who are spiritually bankrupt. The ultimate revenge wasn't the public humiliation or the lawsuit. It was the moment she chose her own peace over their approval. True freedom begins when you stop fighting for a seat at a table where you were never welcome and instead build your own. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members to find your true self? Let me know your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and